Didn't expect this now, didn't ya? Hey there guys, this is Taylor, and welcome to the sequel that y'all asked for, the FNAF Controversy Iceberg 2, Electric Boogaloo. Just like the last Controversy Iceberg, this iceberg will detail controversies that have taken place within the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise over the years, mostly with the community. This time though, we're going over ones that have existed for a long while but weren't talked about in the original video, as well as new ones that spawned after the release of the video. A whole new iceberg chart has been made for the occasion. This iceberg chart was a collaborative effort between me and my friends / channel co-workers, so yeah. I'm gonna assume you've seen the first part, which if that's the case, you should know how an iceberg chart works. However, I'll explain it again to those who don't know. An iceberg chart is meant to be categorized based on how well known or obscure a topic is. The top of the iceberg will contain entries that are pretty well known for the topic, and then as the iceberg goes down, the more obscure the entries get. So pretty much at the bottom of the iceberg, it should be entries that aren't very well known. Anyway, you know the drill. Be sure to hit the subscribe button down below, as well as turn on the notification bell. Also, become a channel member. All are totally optional, but we'd be appreciated if you did. Anyway, without further ado, let's dive right into this behemoth. FNAF Plus cancelled. Starting this iceberg with what is probably the biggest controversy that happened within the FNAF community after the release of my first video, happening kind of immediately after within the same summer. So essentially, as most of you guys probably know, FNAF Plus was an officially licensed reimagining of FNAF 1 being developed by FNAF. Officially licensed as in it was part of Scott Cawthon's Fazbear Fanverse initiative. FNAF Plus would build up a lot of hype surrounding itself by the consistent development updates from Phil, as well as some marketing tactics, those being in the form of those VHS analog horror videos. There were a lot riding on this game. A lot of people were excited about it. However, there were people who weren't and thought the game was gonna suck, whether it be because of the game itself or because of how controversial FNAF was as a figure, which I've discussed about in my previous iceberg. Now, in summer 2023, Steelwool Studios would release the DLC of FNAF Security Breach, Ruin. FNAF would end up streaming himself playing Ruin on YouTube, and he ended up not really liking it. He would go onto Twitter and call it quote-unquote boring. This resulted in quite the reaction from the FNAF community, with people either agreeing or disagreeing with him. However, one individual in particular would stand out among the rest. One of these people would go on to say that after FNAF Plus releases, to tweet something like Phil did for Ruin, to pretty much call it quote-unquote boring. From there, this would lead to a massive downturn. The person who would tweet this was in fact a minor. Even with this, the minor would end up receiving tons of gore and death threats sent their way by a decent amount of people. Not too long after, someone would make a Twitter thread discussing what happened with the minor and what the issue was with this whole situation. And this Twitter thread would result in Phil's first true response to the controversy, which is him memeing about it in the quote retweets. Eventually the controversy would be at its peak in terms of attention and turmoil. Phil would seemingly make a serious statement or apology about it, which was for a twit-long. When you went into the twit-long, there was a video linked. However, the video link would end up being that FNAF Rickworld troll video that has been used by both FNAF and King Carter before to poke fun at any criticism they personally deemed as invalid. This would not be received well at all by the FNAF community whatsoever. Many people were upset by these unserious responses from Phil, and it would even lead to some people wanting FNAF Plus to be cancelled, even going as far as to email Scott Cawthon about it. Hashtags would trend on Twitter wanting Phil to be fired from the fanverse. There was still some debate on whether Phil was responsible for any of this situation, since it was other people who would send the gore and death threats to the minor. However, Phil notably didn't take it seriously, and that was enough for people to turn on him. A few days later, the Steam page for FNAF Plus would be rid of FNAF's name from the attached developer of the page, and he would be banned from the page's discussion forums. He would be unfollowed by the FNAF Plus Twitter account, and on said Twitter account, any mention of Phil was removed from its bio. Theories started to arise on what was happening with both FNAF and FNAF Plus. However, not too long after, FNAF would publicly respond, and it was an actual serious response this time, all in the form of a video that is now gone. Essentially though, it turned out FNAF didn't get fired, but he stepped down himself. As well, despite never being outright said, it was heavily implied FNAF Plus got cancelled, and that still remains to be the case, as there's been nothing about the game ever since this controversy. FNAF would take a massive step back from FNAF for the time being. He would even unlist all of his previous FNAF streams. As well, it was also heavily implied that Porkchop's Horror Show got got cancelled as well. There were even jokes and rumors spread that he was legally not allowed to talk about FNAF because of the contracts and NDAs and agreements he would sign involving FNAF Plus and the fanverse. It would seem like Phil would never touch FNAF ever again. That was until the release of Into the Pit, a FNAF game made by Megacat Studios as a celebration for the 10-year anniversary of FNAF. Fisnam would actually be given permission by Megacat Studios to play the game and give honest thoughts. Phil played it on stream and he ended up actually really enjoying it and liking it. After this stream, Phil would relist his previous FNAF streams. There would be tiny steps of him returning to FNAF after this. He would end up playing Playtime with Percy, a game that is considered not a FNAF fan game but still FNAF inspired, and he enjoyed that. For Christmas, during an event he called the Mascot Horror Slapathon, he would replay each of the FNAF games, play some new fan games from that time like A Bite at Freddy's, which he really enjoyed, and he even replayed Security Breach for the event. After that, Phil was pretty much back in the FNAF community, but he wouldn't really stream it that much on his channel. However, something admittedly surprising did occur. When FNAF Secret of the Mimic released, Phil would end up playing and streaming it, and he loved it a lot. He really enjoyed the game, even citing it as the best FNAF game of all time. This would surprise a lot of people. People even use this as justification for liking Secret of the Mimic, which Phil was quick to state not to do, and that is pretty much where Fisnam is today. FNAF Plus remains cancelled. Hell, this has even led to fan-made recreations of the game. One in particular will be discussed later in this iceberg. However, a lot of people would argue that Phil is happier now that he doesn't have to work on the game and he can pretty much do his own thing. It was also really touching for people that he's even started to even enjoy aspects of modern FNAF such as Into the Pit, Secret of the Mimic, and even fan games like A Bite at Freddy's and Five Nights at Frederick's. Phil was even able to keep up with a lot of friends he had prior to the controversy even after it. With all of this though, there are still a lot of people that aren't huge fans of the guy, whether it be because of the controversy to this day or any minor controversies involving statements he makes on either Twitter or his streams about various things. There are still even theories to this day about the guy and FNAF Plus, one being that Phil lied and didn't actually step down himself, but he actually did get fired. Evidence for this being the attitude in his tweets he would make afterwards. As well, it's also theorized that the people who sent the Gordon death threats to the minor weren't actually Fisnam fans. Phil even entertained the idea. However, it's unknown for sure if that's true or not. Regardless, while it sucks for a lot of people that FNAF Plus got cancelled, there are a lot of people who are happy it did for what transpired. And with that, Fisnam remains as one of the most controversial figures in the FNAF community to this very day, and while it isn't hard to see why, he still has a huge presence online with still loads of people who adore him. All of that simply cannot be denied. FNAF movie. The FNAF movie, as you guys know, is the official film adaptation for FNAF by Blumhouse Productions. There are planned to be multiple movies thanks to the success of the first movie. The first movie made $297.1 million in the box office, and the film had a very mixed reception. That's where the controversy with this movie lies. While there were many people, especially fans, who loved the movie for aspects such as fan service, cameos, and references, the animatronics themselves, the pizzeria, the actors like Matthew Lillard and Josh Hutcherson, and more, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes even being 86%. There was also a notable amount of people who didn't like the film at all. There was a 32% rating on the critics side on Rotten Tomatoes, which, by the way, that critic score for the FNAF movie was notorious for its scoring way lower than Cuties, a film that puts young girls into very sexual and inappropriate situations. Anyway, a lot of the reasons for critics and general people's disdain for the movies goes as follows. One reason being that the film should have been rated R and not PG-13. A big reason people wanted the movie to have an R rating was for more mature themes to be delved into that couldn't be in a PG-13 movie, something that the current film tries to do. Hell, even making the way for more gore. However, a common defense for its PG-13 rating by fans being that the original FNAF series was not really a graphic and mature series, more so having implied dark themes, and that an R rating would not be fitting for FNAF. However, some comebacks to that either being number one, a movie is different in presentation to a game, so it could have made the way for something more in the games, and number two, FNAF, despite keeping a more lighter tone in horror thanks to Security Breach, has started making its way into mature content in an official way, most notably being the Dead by Daylight collab, an official collaboration for an M-rated video game. Another reason people don't like the FNAF movie was the lack of horror, and especially the lack of the usage of the animatronics. Some people think it focused way too much on the day scenes in the movie, and more should have been done with Freddy's. Another reason being how apparently it messes up the lore of the series, despite the movie being its own separate canon from the games. And finally, people's main reason for not liking the movie is them thinking it's not a faithful adaptation to the FNAF games, but the comeback for that is that FNAF has gone a more lighthearted direction with the modern state of the franchise. Regardless of all this though, the FNAF movie remains to be a pretty divided piece of official media for the franchise. In regards to its sequel, people are either really excited, hoping for an improvement, or have no hope in it. The only thing people and fans can do now is just wait and see. FNAF movie theater fights. This entry is referring to the multiple fights that would happen during theater screenings of the FNAF movie back in 2023. Usually these fights would be recorded and people talk about them online, the most notable example in particular being one that took place in Acton, London while the movie's credits were rolling. Now, it was allegedly unknown what actually started the fight, as people say that the moviegoers there were being negative about the movie near the end, which led to the fight supposedly. However, it has been confirmed to be a fake fight to build up hype for the movie, for fun. There was also another fight video somewhere, but this first one I mentioned is the most notable. Now, these theater fights are controversial due to the discussion of what's okay when it comes to theater etiquette. A lot of people groaning at the news of a fight occurring during a FNAF movie, while others don't seem to be bothered by it. It's certainly an interesting case when it comes to the FNAF movie for sure, and that fake fight did serve its purpose of bringing more attention to the movie as this fight had news coverage. Rebornica. This entry was the one that most people in the comments of the original Controversy Iceberg thought was missing or needed, so here it is. Rebornica was someone in the FNAF community who was most known for her FNAF comics and AU that had her own rather unique style for the time. One of her more famous characters she made was her own interpretation of William Afton named Vincent. Vincent would be used in a lot of fan-made works in the community from around this time. Anyway, she would leave the FNAF community at one point due to many controversies. One of the most notable was that there was a massive fan of hers at the time who looked up to her, who continued her AU and her style, which the fan replicated. However, Rebornica told the fan very harsh statements such as for them to fuck off and you're a thief, accusing the fan of stealing and tracing from her. She would even berate this fan for their venting posts. This would lead to the fan getting very upset and deactivating their DeviantArt account. This is not the only time this has happened either. Rebornica would go after multiple other people for using her design, labeling them as thieves. Rebornica would also do other things throughout the year she's been active in the community, like abusing her ex, actively using slurs, posting self-harm, making fun of a sexual assault victim, and would even go as far as to fake her own suicide. There have even been moments of her acting sexual with and sending NSFW to minors, resulting in there being accusations of her being a groomer. Rebornica would get massive amounts of backlash from all of this. Ever since her leave in the FNAF community, there has not been a single trace of her to be found on the internet, not even to this day. In the current day, Rebornica's comics have been deleted, but what can be seen out there is now typically considered quote-unquote cringe. However, there are still people who like the original comics in AU and actively choose to separate the artist with the comics and Rebornica herself. Whatever the case, Rebornica's reputation is ruined now thanks to her actions, but her comics still live on as early FNAF community memorabilia. FNAF Survival Crew. FNAF Survival Crew was a Roblox FNAF game that was actually official and made by Metaverse Team Frights alongside Scott Cawthon's Eye. This game would be released in late 2023, however this game was quick to very poor reception upon release, mostly from gameplay and graphics perspectives. The gameplay would be quick to criticism due to bugs and glitches, as well as just how the game itself actually played out, which was seen as pretty poor, as well the gameplay was seen as just a rip-off of Dead by Daylight. However, the biggest issue of people was that the graphics, which believe it or not, a lot of assets were stolen. There was also straight up stock animations. People were not super huge on these aspects of the game and wondered what was going on with the game. After fandom outcry, the game was taken down within the same day. According to the developers and Scott Cawthon, this game was a beta test and the gameplay and graphics were just unfinished. Apparently the game was not even supposed to be released and there was a huge miscommunication. Scott approved of skinning the game and somehow that got translated to quote-unquote release the game. The people behind the game said they would redo the game from scratch and that improvements would be made before the game had another release. However, this game would end up not being released and the project remained silent after this news. FNAF would end up collabing with Dead by Daylight, a game people thought Survival Crew was ripping off, so it has led people to assume that game got cancelled. It hasn't been confirmed what ended up happening, but that is what people have started to think, and it also makes people wonder if the game will ever come back. Hell, people have even gone to say that the team of people Scott worked with for this game were only making this game because of monetary gain and not because of passion. It's up to you though if you want to believe that much of it. Five Laps at Freddy's. Five Laps at Freddy's is an official FNAF game being created by the people behind Click Team themselves. The game engine Scott Cawthon used to create the FNAF games. This game is meant to be a FNAF kart racing game akin to Mario Kart. It pretty much plays like your average kart racing game, just with FNAF characters, settings, and even its own quirks like jump scares. The demo was officially released on August 7th, 2024 as part of the celebration for the 10-year anniversary of FNAF. However, this demo was immediately brought into infamy as soon as the demo was released. A lot of people were very quick to dislike the game. The main reason cited for people's disdain towards this game was the amount of glitches and bugs present upon launch. There was a decent amount of them, and that was enough to turn people off from the game. Some other critiques people had towards this game was how it doesn't really stand among other kart racing games, how the game isn't multiplayer, as well as even the game's character models. Regardless though, Click Team has publicly came out and addressed the people's concerns with the game and plan on improving the game. The game is said to have an estimated release of 2026, and while not a lot of people are hyped for that game, there's also people that are due to Click Team's statements in regards to improving the game. Monster. Monster is a bonus story in Walmart exclusive Tales from the Pizzaplex number 2/3 Hops and Somnophobia. This is a story about how two childhood friends, Liam and Drew, start working part-time in their local town's pizzeria, Just a Pizza. They're doing this to raise some extra money to afford the dream prom for their girlfriends. However, they're not content with how much they're getting paid, so they write an expose about their boss, Mr. Burton, to the school paper. They get a lot of eyes on their expose, but the more the two friends commit to it, the more truths they discover about him. On the surface, the story seems like your average FNAF book story. However, this story was brought into infamy when it came out due to the parallels to the Scott Cawthon donation controversy, the biggest example from the story being used as evidence being this quote. "Nothing Drew said was true," Liam had written in his article. "The police caught the serial killer, and it wasn't Mr. Burton. Mr. Burton was no monster. He was a good man who tried to live a good life. If we're looking for monsters, I know where we can find them. Just look in the mirror. If you were part of the crowd that badgered Mr. Burton to his fiery end, then you'll find the monster looking back at you." This quote pretty much uses Mr. Burton as a stand-in for Scott Cawthon himself and the monsters to be looked into the mirror as the people who cancelled him for his donations. As soon as people in the FNAF community, especially on the Twitter side, caught on, people were quick to dunk this story. People were getting even more upset with Scott Cawthon because of how they thought he was poking fun at the people who cancelled him. There's also people that thought the monster story itself just wasn't very good and that these parallels made the thing pretty corny. This is certainly an interesting controversy due to how it's pretty much somewhat a smaller controversy that followed up a pretty huge one in the community, albeit a few years later, but the point still remains nonetheless. FNAF X Fortnite. Pretty much FNAF X Fortnite is a collab a lot of people have been asking for literal years, mostly because of the current direction that both games are taking right now, opting for a more silly approach to things. The closest anyone thought we would get to an official announcement of this collab was during the 10-year anniversary of FNAF Week back in 2024, but it was revealed ahead of time that a collab was going to be revealed on a certain day of the week, that being August 5th. Beforehand and still to this day, despite there still being a lot of people that want FNAF in Fortnite, there was also a decent amount of people who didn't want FNAF in Fortnite. Whether it be Fortnite fans that thought FNAF wouldn't fit into the game or just didn't want it in the game for personal reasons, or FNAF fans that didn't want FNAF associated with Fortnite because they don't like Fortnite for personal reasons. Due to that, the possible decision of FNAF being included in Fortnite, despite being something that a lot of people would love, would still be a controversial decision for fans of both games that don't like the other game, especially since both FNAF and Fortnite have big and strong fan bases. That's not the only reason why this entry's on the iceberg though. Another reason why this topic is controversial is because of what actually ended up happening on that collab announcement day of August 5th. It was revealed that Dead by Daylight was going to be the game FNAF would be collaborating with, the chapter officially releasing on June 17th, 2025, with the public test build for the game releasing a few days prior. Even though there was a lot of people excited for this and loving the announcement, especially since FNAF X Dead by Daylight was also another highly requested collab for years due to its massive potential, a lot of fans that wanted FNAF to collaborate with Fortnite were very disappointed and started issues online about it, going to the lengths of hating on Dead by Daylight despite never playing the game themselves, and just a lot of doom posting. There are people who are hopeful that FNAF will make it into Fortnite someday, but there have been also arguments made as to why it would never be. One argument in particular, which was brought up by King Carter, the Popgo's lead developer on Twitter, was that the usage of guns in Fortnite would not be fitting for the FNAF brand, as it rarely ever uses guns. FNAF x Fortnite will remain an interesting subject of discussion for as long as the collab is probably possible for. And again, there's people hoping it will happen someday. However, there's people that hope it won't, and that's the gist of it. Pinky Pills leaving. I've discussed Pinky Pills, aka Claudia Schroeder, before in my previous FNAF Controversy Iceberg. If you want to know what her deal is, the original entry from that video will do the trick. However, another controversy related to her happened after this video, so here it is. Pretty much around May 2024, Pinky Pills controversies were brought into the spotlight again by people in the FNAF community. It got to a point where a hashtag #FirePinkyPills, was made as an effort to fire Pinky Pills from the FNAF series. This outcry led to an actual response from Scott Cawthon. However, this response from Scott was not very well received at all, as Scott would go on to defend Pinky Pills and saying she's just made mistakes and has tried to better herself. Considering what Pinky Pills has done, not a lot of people were happy with this response. There became even more of an outcry in the community, and this controversy, along with another one that happened around the same exact time, led to a lot of people leaving the FNAF community. Eventually, Pinky Pills would come out and announce she was going to be stepping back from the FNAF franchise due to the controversies. Scott would even confirm this to be true. After this, she would make a few statements addressing some of her controversies like the Lady Fitzy situation, DeviantArt situation, and more. After that though, that would be it. This controversy was very rough due to how many fans were upset by what happened, especially Scott's response. This incident started to be seen as another huge reason to hate and or dislike Scott Cawthon. It has even led to people questioning how certain people get hired for the series. In regards to Pinky Pills, people are glad she's gone and away from the FNAF series, hoping for incidents like this to never occur again. Fighting Space 3. This entry is referring to Fighting Space 3, Chicken Space. This was a game created by Scott Cawthon to hype up the FNAF movie. The game being titled and branded as FNAF Movie the Game on GameJolt. Now, this short game was controversial to a bit of the FNAF community. This was due to the NSFW Island level, which featured many references and jokes to rather sexual and inappropriate FNAF things. One of those references being anime Bonnie from Finance and Anime. Another reference that people noticed was Love Taste Toy Chica, a character from years back who was created by Jams 3D. People took issue with this because of how it's a game for a series with a young fan base. However, other people came in and defended the game, saying how the game is meant to be a total joke and how there was a mature warning for it on the GameJolt page. Interesting, isn't it? I show Speed flashing at Chica. iShowSpeed is an online personality and streamer who has been growing in popularity, especially in recent years. He's someone who does a variety of stuff, and boy, I mean it. He's most known for the crazy shit he does, typically on stream. Sometimes he even streams himself playing games, and FNAF is a series he often plays. Back when the Ruin DLC for Security Breach released, he would stream it. However, this stream would end up being infamous. The reason being because of how when he was playing the beginning of the game with the tiny little part with Ruin Glamrock Chica and her jump scare, well, let's just say, iShowSpeed trying to give an over-the-top FNAF jumpscare reaction like a lot of YouTubers and streamers, would accidentally flint out his penis live on camera. This moment would shock the viewers watching the stream, and it instantly led to discussion among many people in regards to what was going to happen with iShowSpeed due to the obvious rule break in YouTube's guidelines. When people would talk about this incident, a lot of people would start referring to iShowSpeed as quote-unquote iShowMeat, which iShowSpeed was quick to state he would not want to be called that. There was also even rumors and theories that Speed actually did this whole thing intentionally as a publicity stunt. Eventually, YouTube would finally respond to the incident. They would state how they weren't going to do anything like taking down his channel or give him a strike or etc. because of how Speed would take initiative by removing the stream. While there were people happy that YouTube took into consideration the fact it was an accident on Speed's end, there was also people that accused YouTube of favoritism, which is a common accusation aimed at the company. Additionally to all of this, there was a clip from Ed and Ross being shared around related to the incident. He would go on to claim he's seen Speed's penis thousands of times in person. This was immediately brought into negative light due to how at the time of the controversy, Speed just turned 18. This was immediately seen as gross and led to discussion of the true dynamic between Eden and Speed. Anyway, in regards to how the FNAF community felt about all this incident really soured that moment for those people in their minds, mostly because of how people started thinking that Ruin is not only known for both this incident and Fistum's controversy as I discussed earlier, and not the game itself. Fans who would think this were often very disappointed with that due to how within the FNAF community, Ruin was considered an underrated gem and was well received for being a step up above the base game of Security Breach. Thinking it deserved more attention from the game itself outside the community with a lot of well received FNAF games previously. However, this controversy was notable enough to be covered by various commentators and news outlets, often not being involved in the FNAF community. Regardless how you feel about this incident, it was a very odd one to say the least. Doug being a creep. This entry is referring to two things. The first thing being how when the FNAF movie novel adaptation was released, one of the major differences between the novel and film was how Doug was notably more of a creep. Doug would be a creep towards other female characters, such as at one point him staring at breasts. There were people upset by this because of how Doug would quickly become a fan favorite character from the FNAF movie and would be relentlessly memed on. It was also just seen as completely out of character for how Doug was portrayed in the FNAF movie, the portrayal that most people preferred for the character. Scott Cawthon would address this on Reddit by saying how he might have sent in the wrong version of the book to Scholastic due to how he deleted the original transcript for it months ago before release. He would also clarify that movie Doug is what's canon and not book Doug. Also, Scott's clarification, the buzz surrounding this out of character moment would die out. However, the second thing this entry is referring to is how the actor for Doug, Michael P. Sullivan, was found to be following gay porn accounts on Twitter. However, the real controversy with this was that some people on Twitter would go on to say that a few of these accounts were barely 18 accounts. Now, evidence for this claim is very sparse. It was said there was some a while ago when it was first discovered, but it has been since deleted, leading to the debate of this if this is all true or not. Apparently it was enough for FNAF fans to want to boycott the merch being made of Doug like the U2's merch. Regardless of what's true or not with the second controversy and what happened with the first controversy, Doug remains as a fan favorite character within the FNAF community and people hope he reappears in the movie sequel. The Talbot Files. The Talbot Files was said to be an early draft of the currently released FNAF book, The Freddy Files. This unreleased book was said to be found by Etem, someone who was considered a trustworthy member of the FNAF community. The Talbot Files was said to be a book that would tie up a lot of loose ends within the FNAF lore at the time this book was supposedly meant to be released, which was around the time of Sister Location. This book was said to contain a lot of reveals for the FNAF series and its lore. However, since the book was unreleased, it was said that what was in this book is no longer canon. Allegedly, Etem would email Scott about what he would find and asked if he was allowed to post it. Scott would apparently leave up to Etem's choice on what he wanted to do. Etem would decide not to release any of it so he wouldn't confuse the FNAF community. Over time though, leaks from this unreleased book started surfacing, but Etem would continue claiming that the book was fake. This would certainly lead to harassment towards Etem. Eventually someone was able to discuss the ordeal with this book with Etem in Twitter DMs. However, this would lead to Twitter DMs of the two being leaked, which even included personal information of Etem. At that point though, the legitimacy of this book was finally revealed to be true according to Etem, and it would lead to further harassment towards the guy, mostly because how he was keeping the book to himself. However, this situation would get even crazier as well. Scott Cawthon himself would go onto Reddit and say he didn't know what the Talbot Files were and that he didn't write it, pretty much meaning that the Talbot Files was just a hoax and was simply not real. However, there would be debates spawned in whether or not it was Scott lying or if it was Etem lying. However, as time went on, it would often be seen by most people that Etem was the one lying and the Talbot Files did not in fact exist. This would lead to Etem leaving the FNAF community. This controversy was a huge one that really divided people at the time, and it led to people even leaving the community. Etem was no longer seen as a trustworthy figure, and there was even some issues brought up about him, like supposedly using AI for his profile picture. Even King Carter bringing up how within the email between Scott and Etem, that isn't how Scott typically talks in emails. It was very crazy in the end, to say the least. TikToker's FNAF movie poster challenge. This entry is referring to how when the FNAF movie was in theaters, there was a TikTok trend of people going to steal the FNAF movie's poster at their local movie theater. They would run off with them essentially. Whether that was legal prosecution for any of that remains unknown. As funny as this trend was for a lot of people, there was also just the fact that there were legalities behind this trend, resulting in quite the experience for the FNAF movie. One of the videos in particular being the kids running into a cop while ditching the theater. Very interesting. Lester Tellez. Lester Tellez is known as the developer behind Grizzlies, a FNAF fan game often regarded as a ridiculous parody due to the political themes within the game's story, as well as the fact the gameplay is typically easy, not needing to use the cameras at all or a lot of the resources the game has within its mechanics. Now, the developer himself, Lester Tellez, is a controversial figure in the FNAF community, especially as of recently upon making this video. The biggest reason why? I'll get to that. For a long while, he was controversial among the FNAF community for being a conservative. There were allegedly DMs leaked where he admitted he was transphobic as well. He was also shown to have a huge ego. However, this did not compare to his big controversy that would cancel him for good. It was revealed that Lester was arrested for 2 third-degree felony counts of battery on someone with a mental or physical disability. This initially shook the FNAF community, especially the fan game side of it. Later, it would then be revealed that he apparently sexually assaulted 2 minors. After all this, it's pretty much safe to say that Lester's career is over. A lot of people are glad he's gone, and this is striking as one of the most recent controversies to occur in the FNAF community as of this video being made. Bluey Capsules. Bluey Capsules are a series of FNAF webcomics that are supposed to be a parody of the FNAF story. Now, the leader of the comics, Reese, has done some pretty controversial things that landed Bluey Capsules as one of the most controversial aspects of the FNAF community. One notable factor to this is how the comics themselves would contain bigoted themes like anti-Semitism, racism, and homophobia. Despite these themes being addressed to an extent, they would remain ongoing throughout the comics. This would tie back to Reese, who was apparently a bigot themselves. They would also allegedly be pretty abusive and manipulative to their team of people working on the comics, often being ableist towards their team and also love-bombing them. Reese would also just be pretty cruel to the team as well. Overall, it's just crazy how much goes down when it comes to just a FNAF webcomic. Torque of 87. This entry is referring to an old video from the early days of FNAF by 3 Lame Studio. This video would be the most notable video to come from this channel, and it pretty much contains the animatronics from FNAF 1 to 3 twerking. This video had a certain weirdness and possibly sexual vibe from it. Due to this, there was a lot of people who ironically liked it and memed on it. However, this video turned a lot of people off, and as a result, they don't like it, leading to complaints. 3 Lame Studio would make similar weird videos to this caliber, especially FNAF ones. Hell, Torque of 87 is even a series. Due to this, the channel would not be very well liked, and it was very often seen as cringe content. In regards to what happened to the video and its creator, it has been since archived as the channel was gone at one point. Thankfully, it has returned, but it only has 1 upload. It is also to be noted that 3 Lame had a constant battle he would go through with YouTube and its algorithm. A lot of the tweets in relation to said battle being on his Twitter. It's a shame for a lot of people who liked it ironically, but it was good news for people who didn't like it and thought it was a rather weird video. Griffilina. Griffilina was a YouTuber who was pretty notable in the FNAF community for their FNAF songs, most notably songs like Stay Calm or Below the Surface. Sometime in December 2016, they would rebrand their channel around this singing robot named Fandroid, making him the mascot of the channel and doing songs and videos with him. However, on June 7th, 2024, the Fandroid team announced on Twitter they would no longer be making videos and that Fandroid was ending. Initially, people were pretty sad about this news, as a rather nostalgic creator was taking his leave from content creation. However, this would all change. On the same day, someone would quote retweet their goodbye tweet with screenshot evidence of Griffilina allegedly grooming a 17-year-old girl. The initial quote retweet would be asked to be taken down so a larger thread could be made about the allegations. A day later, someone who was a former member of the Fandroid team came out and pretty much stated that the allegations were true, and more proof of it was linked to a Twitter thread they made. Griffin would apparently purge their inactive content and even threaten to send a cease and desist to the victim, possibly to keep them silent. There would apparently be more messages sent by Griffin, such as how he wanted to meet up with the victim and take their virginity. As well, it was also revealed that apparently Griffin was 26 when the initial screenshot that was posted took place, and he had known the victim since they were 15. This would disappoint many people, as yet again, Griffin and Fandroid were both nostalgic to FNAF fans, especially for their songs and music. As of currently, Griffin seems to be gone from the community without a trace, and people are just glad that he's been exposed for who he is. Scooby-Doo x FNAF AI. This entry is referring to a fan-made Scooby-Doo episode based off of FNAF. The video was called Springtrapped and was created by Iga and Tildman. Now, for the most part, this video would be really well received for how it accurately captures the vibes of the original Scooby-Doo show, at the same time while also staying true to FNAF to an extent. However, there was somewhat a huge controversy that would arise from this video, so in the original upload of the episode, it used an AI voice for Daphne. This was due to Egon not being able to afford real voice actors for the project. This was brought to the attention of Daphne's actual current voice actress, Gray DeLissel. She notably took massive issue with the AI voice, even so to the point where she threatened to blacklist Egan within the creative circle. While there were some people who took issue with the usage of AI, people notably took issue with how Gray responded. People often stated how her threatening to blacklist Egan was too far and vindictive, especially since she would say this after Egan already apologized and would go on to state he would not use AI in his future works anymore. Thankfully though, Egan would upload another version of Springtrapped but redubbed voices over the AI ones, and Egan would even come out to state how he isn't pro-AI and he shouldn't be seen as an AI apologist. This controversy is notable for how someone notable outside the FNAF community got involved with someone within the community, especially for what was a fan-made project. This one is still in a lot of people's minds though, that's for sure. Jolly 4. For this one, I would like to bring on a special guest, Shadow Jagger. He's been a longtime viewer of my content for years now, and has even voice acted for my Tyler Tales series, which again, do support it in its upcoming film on YouTube and Newgrounds if you'd like. Jagger is also an up-and-coming content creator, making videos about a lot of things, but especially both FNAF and Thomas the Tank Engine. He makes pretty good videos, and I recommend you check him out after this video. He's pretty knowledgeable about this entry on the iceberg, so I'm gonna let him explain it. Take it away, Jagger.
Jolly 4 was going to be the fifth and final game in the FNAF fan game series Jolly, which is based on the real-life Jollibee's restaurants. From 2021 to 2024, several teasers would be revealed, and it really seemed like this game was going to blow the rest of the Jolly series out of the water, with its new characters and its long gameplay with multiple endings. However, on January 21st, 2025, the lead developer of Jolly 4, Ivan G, made a long post on GameJolt detailing what was going on behind the scenes. While it was not blatantly said, this game got cancelled. The main reason is that this game's co-developer, Wishek, who has been a big helping hand in many FNAF fan game projects over the past few years, was mismanaging the Jolly development team through his own way of doing things by creating a quote-unquote contract to not only ensure confidentiality stays in the team, but also making scheduled work hours for every team member, including deadlines, providing him with weekly updates, and even threatening legal action against anyone, including minors unfamiliar with legal trouble, who leak anything, despite this fan game not being copyrighted. Hunter Allen, one of Jolly 4's programmers, said to have worked over 2,000 hours, roughly half a year, in the Unity game engine to meet Wishek's bloated deadlines. And the game's animation director, Blue Girl, was told to complete a previous member's job of animating a 14-page script after this team member left, leaving the door wide open for others to bail out too, like Black Hat for similar reasons. There was also this VIP membership in the Jolly Discord server that existed to compensate developers for their work. However, anyone paying for this membership was not getting what they paid for, and the money made from this membership was not properly given to any of the developers. All of this was happening right behind Ivan's back while he was absent from the team, and he said in his GameJolt post that he was finally made aware of everything through Blue Girl and Hunter Allen. He also blames himself for not stopping this sooner, further killing his motivation to continue the game. To put one more nail in the coffin, Wishek made a post on Discord stating that not only will he indeed give the money made from the VIP memberships to the rest of the Jolly team, but he also said he's not treating the situation seriously as it's just a FNAF fan game, despite him mistreating the other developers as well as threatening legal trouble. And again, despite Jolly 4 not having copyright protection. He did make another post on GameJolt about this whole thing, but I was unable to find the full post. All that's left of Jolly 4 is just a small Click Team Office demo that showcases bits and pieces of what the full version was going to be like. Hunter Allen was making his own video showcasing his part of Jolly 4, but that was cancelled due to his lack of motivation and just giving this project a rest, so yeah. While this is not the first Jolly game to get cancelled, this seems to have left a bigger dent on the series. Back to you, Taylor.
Thanks so much, Shadow Jagger, for coming onto the video. Again, be sure to check his channel out in the description because he makes some pretty good content. Post Shift 2. Post Shift 2 was a sequel to a FNAF fan game called Post Shift. In these two games, you're fending off animatronics who seem to be a hybrid between the classic animatronics and the nightmare animatronics. Now, Post Shift 2 was pretty controversial when the game was initially released. The main reason was because of how ridiculously hard and complex the gameplay was, to a point where the average FNAF player can never beat it. There's a certain gameplay loop to the game that some players are able to find and beat the game with. However, the extreme difficulty of the game was too much for a decent amount of people. The game's tutorials didn't really help with the people's thoughts in the game either. The game would receive updates over time fixing a lot of the issues people have with the game, and as it currently stands, Post Shift 2 is not really that relevant anymore. It did spawn in another controversial situation with another YouTuber, but we'll get to that later in the iceberg. Deducer. Deducer is one of the more recent notable controversial figures among the FNAF community. Deducer is known for his FNAF news coverage, especially in regards to the FNAF movies. Now, why is he so controversial? Well, several reasons. One huge reason for people's disdain for him is the amount of clickbait he's guilty of in his videos. There's also how his other most notable controversy were how when Markiplier's uncle passed away, Deducer took Markiplier saying in his video that he's been out of town working in movie stuff as a way to clickbait news for FNAF Movie 2. This has been regarded as a lot of people's main reason for not liking him. There's also how he would go on to watch one of those Vanessa ASMR videos live in front of his young audience. Those videos are usually considered very weird and suggestive by people in the FNAF community. However, there's still a debate on how bad those videos actually are, and of course not to mention how he's one of those people who tries to get other people to go to the set of FNAF movies to take sneaky pictures with often the sole intention to leak said pictures for the public. This got so bad at one point that a production worker almost got fired. There's also the alleged rumor of him being involved with animal cruelty, however evidence has yet to surface about that, so take that with a grain of salt. Deducer is quite a name within the world of newer FNAF content creators, and he remains as someone that a lot of people don't really have any respect for. Cat FNAF. Cat FNAF is another somewhat infamous content creator for nearly the same reason as Deducer, that being he was another person trying to get a hold of leaks for the FNAF movies during filming, trying to get people on the set to take pictures of anything at the set for him to leak. There's one particular image that I'm not showing here out of respect for the movie crew that started getting spread around thanks to Cat FNAF, that being an image of what Withered Foxy's full body and everything's gonna look like in the FNAF movie 2. However, this leak is still debated on whether or not it's a real leak or not. However, this constant leak behavior would get people in the FNAF community annoyed at him to such a degree, so much so that Cat FNAF would step back from the community for a good bit and even offer a statement. In this statement, he would apologize for how he acted and would vow to become a better person. To this day, he's still active on his other Twitter account, no longer leaking anything about the FNAF movies, and people claim he's changed for the better. Hell, he would even make a final statement months later on his original account, pretty much apologizing for his actions and how he's been actively taking steps to get better. Even though there's still people who aren't huge fans of him for his past actions, there was also a lot of people who forgave him and commended him for improving himself. However, this all just goes to show what leaking stuff for a movie like this can lead to, you know? Not real name, not at all. Not real name, not at all, is a FNAF YouTuber who's known for her videos that often theorize about FNAF. She's on this iceberg for a multitude of reasons. Generally, she has what people consider as pretty bad takes, one involving the puppet and the security puppet being different characters just so her favorite character can have more screen time. Even thinking the daycare attendant is better than the mimic because he'd like a pervert in a library, her takes pretty much implied to people that she hates FNAF as well. As well, there's even more controversy to her than just that. She has apparently even claimed that the Fast for Fright story, What We Found, was about Hudson's stepdad sexually assaulting Hudson. Apparently, she has also even said about the FNAF novels that Charlie was only into John just because he appeared to look like Henry, her father. Now, there are people who still chose to watch her and defend her content, but there's a decent amount of people who don't like it for those mentioned reasons. She still makes content to this day, so she's at least not stopping because of these controversies. Christopher McAuliffe's statements. Christopher McAuliffe is known as the former voice actor for Foxy, Pigpatch, Vlad, and Fredbear in FNAF World and Friday in Space 2. Now, believe it or not, they don't provide voice work for the series anymore. It has never been outright confirmed why, but the main reason people have assumed is that this has to do with controversial statements he has said online. One huge instance were memes about how cosplayers deserve and or asked to be sexually assaulted. Another huge instance was how Chris made statements that were in favor of Scott Cawthon during his big controversy, typically trying to silence the people that are against Scott. It is also noted that Chris liked a reply somewhere that was saying how Scott's donations had no effect on anyone. There was people that took obvious issue with all that. Another thing McAuliffe would do is that live on stream, he would leak the fact that he was going to voice act for an official Silverized 2D game that got cancelled. People concluded he leaked this piece of information because he got mad at Kellen Goff for replacing his role as Foxy in the FNAF movie. However, with that one, Chris and Kellen both came out and said there's no drama between them and the assumptions and situation were blown way out of proportion. There was also how Chris was accused of endangering minors on his Discord server with how NSFW was handled on the server. Chris would attempt to address the statements he's made, but people think he didn't really do a good job at all. This all just remains as a tale of how one of the most beloved voice actors for a popular franchise can make the raw moves and suddenly become one of the most infamous figures within the franchise. The Baddest. The Baddest is an essay YouTuber who's popular within both the FNAF community and the general mascot horror community. Now, she was talked about before in the previous Controversy Iceberg due to her Islamophobia. However, since that video, she would get herself wrapped up in newer controversies that would ultimately ruin her reputation. They all pretty much stem from her love for the game, The Coffin of Andy and Lele. The Coffin of Andy and Lele is a game that is infamous among people online for its themes of incest between the two title characters who are siblings. The Baddest would often be the one defending this game from its criticism about incest, which a lot of people found odd. However, there would be screenshots that would come out and be posted where she would actively defend and claim she was into incest. This got people in arms with her as she started to be considered a weirdo that's into incest. As well, another notable controversy that would take place was she would apparently create an NSFW account on Twitter. The thing with this, though, was she started promoting this account on her main Twitter and on her YouTube channel, places where a lot of her young audience reside. After this, the Baddest's reputation within the FNAF community was damaged. She already didn't have the best reputation for people simply thinking she had bad takes on FNAF games and mascot horror games. One that got to people in particular was how it's okay to separate creator and creation with Flumpties and Jonochrome, but it's not okay to separate creator and creation with the Joy Creation and Nixon. However, these controversies involving incest and the NSFW account really put a massive hole in her career. The Baddest would come out about all this and address these issues, stating she's not into incest and how she wants to move on from all this, claiming a lot of what she said were just bad jokes. Regardless though, people still thought it was messed up she would say these things, and some people believe she's lying about the bad jokes aspect as some of the revealed screenshots would imply. The Baddest still uploads to this day regardless of her reputation, but a lot of people try not to forget about the controversies that went on with her. U2's. U2's is a merchandise company that makes collectibles for a lot of popular media, famous examples being Minecraft, Hatsune Miku, South Park, SpongeBob, Hazbin Hotel, Bendy, and most notably FNAF. They have made so much collectible merch for FNAF, ranging from figures to plushies to shoulder riders to posters, all you name it. Now, despite the merch being considered high quality to many people, U2's is still the subject of criticism a lot of the time. The main two reasons being how expensive their products are and how you only have a limited amount of time to get certain products. A comeback for the first reason is typically in regards to the rather high quality of the merch. A comeback for the second reason is typically because of it being a marketing tactic, that being FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's a popular marketing tactic among businesses selling products, especially anticipated ones. Regardless, people have taken severe issue with YouTube's before over this, especially the second reason. This is heavily the case for a lot of the FNAF merch too, hence why it has its own spot on the iceberg. The most infamous example in recent times is when the FNAF 4 figures were released. You only had 7 days to get the 6 figures there were, which would have been around $200+ to get them all. FNAF fans were naturally very upset about this upon its announcement, and people have gone as far as to not include the FNAF 4 U2's wave in their merch collections or whatnot. The backlash for this in particular led to U2's extending the availability of the FNAF 4 U2's figures for another week. People hope that someday U2's could drop the limited time aspect of their brand, but only time will tell.
X-Men 723.
X-Men 723 is a YouTuber within the FNAF community who's most known for their FNAF Gmod content. At first, it seems like average FNAF Gmod videos that you would typically expect. However, people would end up taking a closer look at these videos and they would often contain sexual themes. How it even makes it to the thumbnail sometimes. There would also often be themes of incest and pedophilia. This would cause a stir, as it's said that X-Men typically markets his content to a younger audience who shouldn't really be watching this content. X-Men would end up making his side of the controversy clear later on. It pretty much will boil down to him stating he can upload whatever content he wants and that people have the choice to not watch it if they don't want to. This would especially be heightened by the fact X-Men was a child himself when he started making this content. Even though there was a lot of people who would end up siding with him, there is still people even critical of both him and his content to this very day.
Direct Doggo almost leaving the internet.
This entry is referring to how Direct Doggo, the creator of the Day Shift at Freddy's trilogy, would disappear off the face of the internet for a long while before the release of the third game. He deleted nearly every single one of his profiles as well as the game's pages for the Day Shift games, which got archived and reposted by other people during the time period. Now, for the longest time, it was thought that the reason for this was because of harassment by fans and other people online, so he pretty much went on and quit the internet. Without a trace, people thought he was gone for good. It was also implied that due to what seemed to be happening, Day Shift 3 was cancelled too. It wasn't until 2018 that Doggo did in fact return, and he publicly stated that he was unfortunately hospitalized for very serious health issues. The lack of support for him from his own fans was what drove him to wanting to leave the internet for a good while. He resumed development on Day Shift 3 and put the game pages back up for the series. He would end up returning to his socials. Thankfully, in the end, Day Shift at Freddy's 3 would be finished and released to a fantastic reception from the FNAF community, and Doggo would even have his own success with Dial Town afterwards. However, situations like this really put into perspective how a lot of speculation towards a certain person can really go a long way to a point where it becomes too much.
Animator's Hell.
Animator's Hell was a FNAF fan game that has been in the works for multiple years. It's a FNAF fan game that stars many FNAF animators within the FNAF community, especially FNAF SFM animators. Now, the development teams have changed up over time, and if you look into the behind the scenes of what was going on with the game and the people behind it, you'll see why. One of the original head developers of the game, Hunter L., was exposed for pedophilia, specifically grooming a 16-year-old as well as threatening to murder his ex-girlfriend. Multiple pieces of evidence and screenshots have come out about it over time. This led to Hunter being removed from the development team. This eventually led to a new head developer coming to take his place, which would be Saminant Blake. This newer version of the game being called Animator's Hell Definitive Edition. It seemed like new development on the game was going well until it got cancelled again. Why? Well, it was revealed in June 2025 that Blake, as well as other members of the developer team, still had contact with the infamous Hunter L. and even let him have some type of involvement with the game's development again. They would publicly denounce Hunter's actions, but then go and be chill with him privately. There's even more issues that were revealed that also involved Blake not treating the development team well, such as shutting down ideas constantly from team members, putting the dev team on radio silence with no real progress in the game being made, removing team members even as a head developer due to inactivity, failing to designate tasks to team members, and much more. This was all revealed by someone who was once associated with the project who no longer wants to be, as well as many others due to the actions of the development team. Blake would make a statement addressing this, and he would say he was going to leave the internet. Like I said, a lot of this has led to the game being cancelled for the final time. A lot of people were saddened by this because the game had so much potential and its release demos were really well received. However, it's another case of how the person or people working on a game aren't so great, so it leads to consequences that often involve the game itself.
FNAF in real time.
FNAF in Real Time is a FNAF fan game that came out in December 2024. It's a FNAF fan game that has a very mixed reception online. There's a lot to be said about both the game itself and the game's lead developer. As for the game itself, the game is simply just a bad FNAF fan game in the eyes of a lot of people in the FNAF community. Whether it be because of how the creators alleged self-insert brother replaced Golden Freddy, how the gameplay goes against the point of FNAF 1 and its creepy atmosphere, or how the game is littered with little bad quirks and decisions that make people think the game was only made for attention and clout. Some would even go as far as to say it was an industry plant. As for the developer Terran, they have been accused of allegedly mistreating their development team, mostly in how a lot of them weren't really compensated for their works on the game, as well as how a lot of the concerns and ideas given by the team members were just completely ignored. Apparently for the final month before Real Time's release, the game was being rewritten entirely and was being backed by one coder. This would apparently be the case for Tyrant's other projects like the FNAF movie game, and an upcoming mascot horror game in the works called Pinata Puppy World. It would come out that apparently Pinata Puppy World was only being made for money and clout, and that was it. No other reason. Mostly due to how when the person who came out about this on Twitter joined the development team, they would be quick to point out how half the game's conceptualization meeting was dedicated to how much money this game would make in comparison to other recent mascot horror games like Indigo Park. The trailer for this game would be released, and a lot of people were right in their assumptions that this would be a generic mascot horror game for the sole purpose of trying to seek out money and clout. It would also be dug up that Terran said pretty racist statements. However, Terran would respond to those racism allegations with how they were years ago and how he regrets saying them. Terran would even respond to the accusations about his poor management skills and an apology and how he wants to do better, acknowledging what was being said about him. Some people forgive him, some don't. Regardless, FNAF in Real Time and its developer remain as one of the most controversial parts in the FNAF fan game community due to just how much would happen during the development of the game.
Escape the Pizzaplex.
Escape the Pizzaplex is the final interactive novel to come from FNAF. This one takes place at the Pizzaplex from FNAF Security Breach. This interactive novel is on the iceberg due to the poor reception it got. The main piece of criticism towards it by fans is how it doesn't add anything new to the lore of Security Breach. There simply wasn't enough interesting reveals or revelations, so it just served to be a pretty boring book for people. Now, it isn't as controversial as Return to the Pit because it didn't necessarily have anything people consider as quote-unquote ruining the lore, but it was a book that not a lot of fans cared for. That honestly was the case for the FNAF interactive novels in the eyes of the FNAF community, except for the week before at least. That one was really well received, with even fans that don't care for the books even liking it. As it stands though, you won't hear much praise towards this book as it was pretty much labeled as a nothing burger.
Stuck Inside.
Stuck Inside is a popular FNAF fan song created and released in 2023 by Black Griffin with some help from the Living Tombstone. This was a song dedicated to the FNAF movie. Now, the song itself is still beloved among a lot of fans and people, usually regarded as a catchy bop by those who like it. However, there is also a notable amount of people who straight up don't like this song at all. The main reason people have for not liking this song is how the song apparently heavily mischaracterizes Afton. The song's lyrics basically go for the theory that Afton loved his children and actually cared about them, which is already a theory that is not respected among a decent amount of people in the FNAF community. The popular consensus being that Afton didn't care about his children at all, and Afton really is a sick and terrible individual. A lot of people just seem to not like that about the song, not one bit. It's possible there's some people out there that genuinely don't like the song for other reasons outside of that, like maybe the sound of the song for example, but most of the hate for the song stems from that. As well, the other somewhat huge reason people don't care for the song is a certain word that's used in the lyrics, that being the word unalive. A lot of the people that criticize the song for that reason usually say that is because using the word comes across as too childish and too unserious. There's also controversy regarding the creator of the song himself, Black Griffin or Gabriel, which we'll get to later in the iceberg. Stuck Inside is one of those very divisive FNAF songs in the community. There's people who love the song for their own reasons, and there's people who dislike it for their own reasons.
FNAF Secret of the Mimic.
This entry is referring to how the FNAF theorizing YouTuber FNAF reacted to Secret of the Mimic. When he was playing for the game, he notably had a deadpan reaction to most of the game, and he apparently had an opinion on the lore the game presented. All this led to a huge assumption by fans that he hated Secret of the Mimic. This has even led to people accusing him of caring too much about theorizing to the point where he can't enjoy a FNAF game. This would prompt a response from FNAF himself, where he would state that he did enjoy Secret of the Mimic a lot, and he was just overwhelmed by it that he couldn't really give a reaction to the game. He also stated he wasn't upset that his theories were proven wrong. The fact he had to make a response just shows the lengths FNAF fans will go if there's one speck of evidence that a notable creator in the community didn't like a game.
Black Griffin.
Gabe Brown, otherwise known as Black Griffin, is most famously known in the FNAF community for being the creator of the FNAF song Stuck Inside. Now, he's controversial because of how allegedly he would groom his current wife. His wife being Claire Corlett, who is the voice actress for Sweetie Belle in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Apparently they would meet when Gabe was 25 and Claire was 14. In December 2023, a call-out post was posted onto Twitter by the user BronyFandon. However, Katie Nelson, who is known as the creator of the game Billy Bust Up, would be a public defender for Gabe and would post a response that had testimony from the alleged victims of Gabe. Testimony pretty much being that they weren't groomed. Fondit would however argue that it was still grooming because Gabe groomed Corlett into marrying him as the years went on. There would apparently even be a lawsuit that would take place between Corlett and Fandon. Apparently February 2025, more allegations posted by Fandon would show up, accusing Gabe of sending sexual pictures of himself to a 13-year-old when he was 23. However, these would apparently be disproven by the fact at the time it was not possible to send images in Twitter DMs. This would also just lead to a lot of people not believing the allegations. Despite that though, Gabe is still seen as a groomer by many for how he met his wife when she was 14, and that would still be enough to ruin his reputation. Hell, even the Living Tombstone would unlist their FNAF song Goth remix that had Gabe in it to cut ties and associations. Nowadays, he's still seen as a groomer by a lot of people. At the same time though, there's also a lot of people who don't believe the allegations and defend him to this day. Regardless, people are sure not to forget his controversies.
FNAF Elsagate.
This entry is referring to the amount of Elsagate content there is for FNAF. Elsagate content, to those who are unaware, are videos of content on YouTube that are seemingly family and child-friendly based off the titles and thumbnails. Even using child-friendly characters like Elsa and Spider-Man, and then the actual contents of the videos contain very inappropriate and graphic subject matter using these characters. Since FNAF has a young fan base, FNAF being used for this content was imminent, and there's plenty of this content all over YouTube. Like, a lot. Usually people take issue with this content for exposing children to certain things that children should be exposed to at young ages. Especially with how they get tricked into watching because it has characters they love and latch onto. It's a very insane situation that is still being dealt with by YouTube to this very day. A lot of people hope that someday, this type of content will go completely extinct on the platform entirely.
Queso Secret of the Mimic.
This entry is referring to how the popular streamer Queso reacted to the release of Secret of the Mimic. He showed not much interest in playing it, and he would go on and state how he preferred the original FNAF games for various reasons.
I know about the new Five Nights at Freddy's game, bruh. I don't like it, bro. I've seen it. It don't look like something I'd enjoy playing. If they would just release a regular Five Nights at Freddy's game instead of something that's trying to be, what's it called? Poppy Playtime, bro. It looks like a reskin Poppy Playtime, bro. I'm sorry. I want a new Five Nights at Freddy's game to come out to where it's Five Nights at Freddy's mechanics, bro. I don't want to put, because I didn't like Security Breach. I actually hated Security Breach. And then this one looks the same, bro. Not gonna lie. Classic Five Nights at Freddy's is dead now. But why? Why, though? Why don't they make another one? My favorite Five Nights at Freddy's game was Pizzeria Simulator. That game was slightly different than the rest of all the other Five Nights at Freddy's games, but it was good. Yo, if the original, and I love Five Nights at Freddy's, but I ain't even cooking Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm really not even cooking them. Dude, like Sister Location? Dadgum Sister? Dude, Sister Location was goated. Pizzeria Simulator was goated. They were all the same type of premise, but with different variations without straying away from the original thing that makes it good. Because I think the reason that Five Nights at Freddy's is so beloved and everybody likes it is that there's a novelty factor to the game. And I feel like releasing something like Poppy Playtime with all this fancy stuff going on and all that, it kind of takes away the novelty of it. I'm not gonna lie. There's no point in releasing another copy pasta Five Nights at Freddy's game. You're so dumb, so let's release a copy pasta dadgum Poppy Playtime game. What are you talking about?
There were a lot of people not happy about this, and some people were even trying to cancel Queso over it. However, Queso would not get canceled over it, and there were people who defended him in his opinion. Queso wouldn't really respond to this backlash, and he would continue to stream like normal. In general, there's been a bigger divide started because of Secret of the Mimic, where it's old FNAF fans versus new FNAF fans, pretty much arguing which is better. Arguably, the divide started with Security Breach, but a lot of people would agree Secret of the Mimic made this problem worse. Wherever you fall under O is up to you.
Scott Cawthon Zionism.
This entry is referring to how back in 2024, DACA would host a charity stream that was for the Palestine's Children Relief Fund, which is for funding the needs to help children suffering amidst the wars taking place between Palestine and the Middle East. Now, typically when it comes to charity streams, Scott Cawthon himself would donate thousands of money to it, even to the point where he's up there as one of the top donors for the stream. However, for this charity stream, it was pointed out when it was over that Scott didn't donate to it at all. Because of the fact this was a charity stream for Palestine, this would lead to people accusing Scott of being a Zionist, and someone who is more supportive of Israel in the current conflict between them and Palestine. Now, to some, this would seem like a baseless accusation. However, more evidence such as him teaming up with Jazzwares, a merch company known for being Zionist, as well as teaming up with Jason Blum, a Zionist for the FNAF movies, which was enough for people to start considering him a Zionist. Scott would never respond to this claim about him, but it's now somewhat of another accusation aimed his way besides the donation controversy from 2021.
DA Games accusations.
Will Ryan, also known as DA Games, is someone who's notable in the FNAF community for his various FNAF songs, especially ones like Left Behind, Break My Mind, We Want Out, It's Time to Die, and etc. Now, a lot of these accusations that we're going to be talking about have actually been known by some people prior to the blow-up and attention they got, but it wasn't really until sometime in early 2025 until these, well, got actual attention. He would be accused of the following: broken promises, lack of control for his audience, unwarranted trauma dumping, abuse of power, mistreating fan artists and fans in general, manipulation, disregarding safety and private information, ableism, sexism, racism, victim blaming, and most infamously, being involved with Lolly and sharing such NSFW to his younger fans on Discord. There was also accusations made of him grooming his ex-partner Chloe. There would also be claims made about Will with a lot of evidence and screenshots to back them up. Due to this, a lot of people started believing the accusations. In regards to Will, though, he would end up never responding to any of the allegations. Months later, he would go back to posting content again after what seemed like an extended break. Apparently, despite Will never saying anything, these allegations would somehow be debunked. Mostly coming from how a lot of these claims being made about him were examples from years ago, and how Will has apparently moved past this. As well, Chloe, his ex-partner, would be reached out to and would claim she wasn't groomed. A lot of people remain supporters of DA Games to this day, even after the allegations. Meanwhile, there's still people who still don't support him. As of now, like I said, Will is back to uploading content and continuing out his career like he always has. Some people still think it's weird he never responded to the allegations made about him, but a lot of people are just glad to think it's possible they weren't true to begin with.
Matthew Lillard interview.
This entry is referring to how in October 2024, DACA and FNAF announced they'd be doing a Q&A and autographs with various people that are part of the FNAF franchise. The Security Breach voice actors, the regular Sauce, and apparently Matthew Lillard. If you don't know by now, Matthew Lillard portrays William Afton in the FNAF movies. People instantly got excited for this announcement. However, Matthew Lillard himself would come out and say that it's weird DACA and FNAF were advertising that he would be participating in this Q&A when he wasn't. FNAF and DACA would both apologize for this and were trying to figure out what happened with Streamily, which is what they were using to hold their event. It's said what happened was just a simple miscommunication, as DACA and FNAF are notable figures in the FNAF community who are usually seen as respectful people. Some people even took issue with Matthew Lillard putting these two on full blast instead of sorting this out privately. However, people also say Lillard needed to get the word out somehow. It was quite the mess of a situation.
LEGO FNAF DMCA takedown.
This entry is referring to how a FNAF fan game called LEGO FNAF, which was pretty much FNAF 1 recreated with Legos, received a DMCA takedown by the LEGO Corporation. This takedown would result in LEGO FNAF being unplayable and its planned sequels, LEGO FNAF 2 to 3, being cancelled by the developers. Now, it's unknown why exactly the takedown happened. The likely theory that was even stated by the developers is that since you had to own FNAF 1 to play the LEGO FNAF game, there could possibly be money going to Scott that should have been going to LEGO all along. This requirement was funnily enough in place to avoid the same consequence, but from Scott Cawthon, so in the end it seemed to be a lose-lose situation with this game. Regardless what happened though, it saddened a lot of people in the community, and it remains as another lost FNAF fan game. People hope for a miracle in regards to this game someday, but it's also considered to be very unlikely for that to be the case.
Updated security breach files.
This entry is concerning the updated version of the Security Breach Files book. It's meant to be more of an up-to-date version of said book, which served as Security Breach's own dedicated version of the Freddy Files book. This updated version, just like the previous book, was not very well received within the FNAF community, and notably had even more misinformation this time round. However, a different problem that arose with this book in the eyes of the people was the amount of grammatical errors and formatting issues found. It's issues like this that turns people away from the Freddy Files books. However, there are still people who get them for either collection reasons or just to genuinely get more information about the franchise.
Fan-made FNAF Plus.
This entry is referring to a fan-made recreation of FNAF Plus that was released by Lost Paul Play sometime after the FNAF Controversy. This fan-made recreation would be pretty controversial for one huge reason though, that being because of how Phone Guy's voice in the game was actually AI.
Hello? Hello? Well, welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I know it won't be an easy job, although this must be a real treasure for you, considering your line of work and all. All in all,
a lot of people took issue with this, especially with the fact that YouTubers were treating this game as the real FNAF Plus and how the developer is profiting off of the game's donation links. People, especially Kane Carter, would be quick to point out Lost Paul Play's alleged egotistical and spiteful behavior, claiming he's better than Fisnum and everything. Back to the AI aspect of the game though, Scott Cawthon himself would actually step in and get the game taken down. He would make a public statement on how he's against his voice being used as AI for projects like this. It would also claim the same goes for the other voice actors in the FNAF series. After this, a lot of the YouTubers who played this game would take down their videos on the game out of respect for Scott Cawthon. This is simply just another case of AI being used in a FNAF project being created by a fan and how it goes south.
MR Sprains Jazzwares.
This entry is referring to how it's been noted quite a bit that the FNAF YouTuber Merch Review Springs would show support for the Jazzwares FNAF merch. This would be at the rise of the controversy with Jazzwares on how they're a Zionist company. MR Springs would make a video where they discussed the Jazzwares FNAF merch, and people were quick to point out there was no acknowledgement of them being Zionists. MR Springs would respond to this outcry on Twitter with how they didn't appreciate being told they supported a genocide for what was a video just going over what there is to expect about Jazzwares FNAF merch. They would also state that they weren't going to support the merch line directly. Later on, it was discovered that there was some misinformation going around about the whole Jazzwares and Zionism controversy, and Springs is one of the people who would discuss it on Twitter. Very interesting, to say the least.
Ultimate Custom Night Fredbear.
This entry is referring to Fredbear's appearance in Ultimate Custom Night. In the game, he appears as a secret character that jump scares you after you put Golden Freddy at one AI alone and use the death coin on him in-game. People have taken issue with his Ultimate Custom Night design over the years since the game's release due to how he's simply a recolor of classic Freddy. People expected him to have a somewhat original design, so ultimately people were disappointed. Some people have suggested that he should have looked like a fixed version of Nightmare Fredbear, but there's also people that are not huge fans of the idea due to how monstrous he would still look for a public setting. There are of course people who don't mind his design in UCN and even like it, but there's still a notable amount of people who don't care for it, which is interesting.
Kane Carter vs. Sparky.
When the FNAF movie released, everyone was quick to point out the Sparky cameo in it. Sparky the dog was a hoax character from the early days of FNAF 1 that was really popular. A lot of people believed he was real. To see him be in the FNAF movie was such a nostalgic kick for longtime FNAF fans going to see the film, and even the creator of Sparky was honored. All in all, mostly everyone was happy for the reference. Mostly. One person in particular took massive issue with it, and that was Kane Carter. Kane was quick to make a statement on Discord regarding the reference in the movie. He would go on to say how Sparky shouldn't have been referenced in the FNAF movie because of how, allegedly, the Sparky hoax was only created to deliberately trick and lie to people. According to Kane, the creator of the hoax was apparently pretty persistent about this hoax to the point where he considered it quote-unquote weird. There's also the gaslighting claim as well. Kane also seemingly got defensive over this too, as he also has proven in his main statement. A lot of people were quick to point out that Sparky being in the movie was just a fun nostalgic reference and it's not a big deal. Some people even joked about how Kane wanted Popgoes in the movie instead of Sparky, and that's why he was truly upset. People saw this as Kane getting upset over nothing pretty much. Whether you think Kane has a point or not is up to you.
J Cinema.
J Cinema is infamous among the FNAF community. Pretty much they will upload other people's fan works and do so without crediting them at all. People obviously take severe issue with it, especially since they've been doing it for literal years and still do it to this day. Hell, it even gets to a point where if someone criticizes them publicly, they'll try to get that person taken down via DMCA. With this, it adds on to the insane controversy with this channel. Some people hope that one day they'll be stopped, but like I said, they're still uploading content deemed as stolen and uncredited, so time will tell.
Puppet Steve.
What's this? Another guest star? I want to bring on Condensed Milk. He's been a viewer of my channel for a long time, just like Shadow Jagger, and he's also got a channel you guys should definitely check out. Take it away, Condensed.
Puppet Steve might be one of my favorite rabbit holes to be connected to the FNAF community. There is just so much to talk about with this guy, it's insane. You may be confused like, why is he on here? He's just a kid's channel using a Minecraft Steve puppet to review toys. But then you see their reviews of Rick and Morty toys, Hell of a Boss toys, Bendy and the Ink Machine, and most unpopular of all, FNAF. Puppet Steve was a very prominent figure in the FNAF collecting community, and often got products early from the, at the time, prime FNAF license holder, Funko. Even though the FNAF fandom liked him a lot, it was very apparent to most people that Steve just didn't really give a shit about FNAF, and got so many details wrong about the franchise. It's just that FNAF is one of the most insanely popular franchises with kids, so making FNAF toy videos is bound to generate tons of money. Most interesting of all is that Puppet Steve is speculated to be the infamous Chris Bores, otherwise known as the Irate Gamer. I say speculated even though it's very obvious to most people. There's so much evidence we just lack an explicit confirmation from Bores himself. The Irate Gamer is a whole other can of worms, but let's just say he's well known for behavior the wider internet perceives as immature. The first controversy Puppet Steve got into was the time he said that Funko themselves contacted him for advice on the next wave of FNAF products, and wanted his viewers to pick the next wave. Tons of fans jumped and used this opportunity to ask for what they've wanted for years, merch of the FNAF 2 cast, more specifically the Withered animatronics, due to Funko completely skipping FNAF 2 for action figures for some reason, and the only Withered figures they've made otherwise being a Withered Bonnie Mini and Funko Pop. Puppet Steve confirmed this, making fans overjoyed, and years later, where are they? It's estimated Puppet Steve lied about this information, backed up by the fact that his heavily speculated secret identity was a notorious liar when he was active on YouTube. To quell discourse, Puppetry Steven showcased the contents of the list 2 years later, and this, I'll just say, it's pretty obvious that a lot of kids watch him and he doesn't really know much about FNAF, but oddly enough, he mentioned playsets which were leaked a week prior to the video and did release, so either he speed typed this list to capitalize on something that could prove unreliable, or he's telling the truth, who knows. End of the day, Funko never made Withered action figures. That's where Jazzwares comes in, which is a whole other controversy within itself. But yeah, after Funko lost the figure license and went on to only really make Pops, which I could go on a rant about how ugly these things are, but running short on time. Anyways, the main reason Puppet Steve is controversial is his copyright striking of YouTubers Merch Review Springs and Johnny Blocks. Puppet Steve went to the 2025 Toy Fair, which Chris Bores also attended, and filmed footage of the new figures. Johnny and Springs used the clip in their own news videos, assuming Steve would be chill with it. He was not. He left this intimidating-ass comment and took down their videos and copyright struck their channels. This made a lot of people mad as they were before a decently well-respected figure in the community. This was also around the same time Boar's copyright struck Magic Mush, so people also quickly found about the Puppet Steve strikes, causing Puppet Steve to reverse the strikes not long after he tried to justify them. Well, at least the strikes are lifted now. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who published 3 books you can buy physical copies of that mostly consist of images of Funko products, and he's the one being defensive over this video of figures that aren't even his as copyright. At the end of the day, the channel is still active, but Puppet Steve has lost immense amounts of respect from the community that once respected him.
Pretty interesting to say the least. Anyway, be sure to check out Condensed Milk, and thank you for coming on.
Pogo's plush.
Now, Pogo's is someone who I discussed in the previous Controversy Iceberg. However, a lot of his controversies I talked about were some of his more older ones. In terms of newer ones, there's stuff about him acting pretty strange towards other YouTubers and people within the FNAF community. There's also how he apparently puts sexualized themes in his videos that are mostly watched by children. There's just plenty. However, the focus of this entry is his plush channel, which a lot of people have deemed as a FNAF SML knockoff. The channel's videos were criticized heavily for its edgy humor that left a very bad taste in people's mouths. However, there was one that notably got attention. That was a video called The Grinch. It pretty much had Mr. Hippo, who's a pedophile character in this series, be the Grinch and be creepy towards the young characters. This video would be taken down following backlash. A lot of people don't like this channel and Pogo's in general for a lot of reasons, and it just goes to show that even FNAF YouTubers can be pretty infamous.
Markiplier cheating FNAF 2 1020 mode.
This entry is referring to the alleged claims that Markiplier cheated to victory in FNAF 2 1020 mode. It was said that he pretty much meshed clips together of him playing multiple custom nights with different AI modes, and he would pass off the whole run as 1020 mode completion. At the time, he was able to get away with it as people were not knowledgeable on the inner workings of FNAF challenges. However, years later, people have been aware of how each FNAF game works to a T, and people caught on. Now, whether or not you believe Markiplier actually cheated in 1020 mode is up to your interpretation. However, a lot of people who believed he did hope that someday he could go back to 1020 mode in FNAF 2 and beat it for real, since there have been better strategies discovered. Also, just because Markiplier is a heavily respected figure among FNAF fans and they want to see the best come out of him, who knows?
Five Nights to Remember Bunny.
Bunny is a character from the FNAF fan game Five Nights to Remember. Originally it was a fan game created by Stella Whiffs, but later remade by Radiance. In the original, there was a character named Spring Bunny, Bunny spelled with an IE instead of a Y. Her design was seemingly a normal Spring Bonnie character. However, when it came to the remake of the game, Bunny was given a redesign that was interesting, to say the least. There were people who took issue with the version of the character in the remake due to her anthropomorphic appearance. Radiance would respond to these complaints about this character on Twitter and claim that people getting upset were feeding into the reason why she exists. Even going on to state she was designed the way she was to mock the recent trend in fan games where there's a sexualized character. Even with that aside, there were still lots of people who didn't care and still enjoyed the remake for what it was. Just another heated debate within the FNAF fan game community.
Sly Pie.
I'm bringing in another guest star for this video. Woohoo! I'm bringing on PT Tackett to talk about this entry. He's a viewer of my channel and makes pretty good content on his own YouTube channel. He is also the voice actor for my Tyler Tales series, being the voices of Autocyber, the Inspector, Mayor Franklin, Mr. Flishman, Tom, Montgomery, Braxton, and so many more. He's the GOAT man. Anyway, take it away, PT Tackett.
Sly Pie, also known as Sly, is a FNAF plush tuber with 2.53 million subscribers. The channel was created November 8, 2016, with their first video being posted November 13, 2016, titled FNAF Plush The Juice Bar. It's currently sitting at 206,000 views. He has a lot of non-plush related videos as well, including some gaming, like Roblox and other stuff like a face reveal and the such. Though it seems that plush videos ended up being the thing he stuck with for for a good reason. As he got better and better, more entertaining, it ended up striking gold for his YouTube channel as he reached 1,000 subs in under a year in July of 2017. Now, if you've ever heard about Sly Pie and it wasn't from what I've mentioned before, then you probably recognize him from his Stay Calm FNAF plush music video released on August 26, 2017, featuring the hit song by Griffinella and Fandroid titled Stay Calm. The video amassed a total of 9.5 million views and is still counting steadily to this day. This actually isn't the most popular video on their channel, being outshined by the video FNAF Plush Parts and Service, released April 9, 2018, and reaching around 13.4 million views. While the most popular videos are currently around 7 years old now, his recent videos are still gaining more than 100,000 views per video, reaching consistently around 300,000 views, which is pretty good for 2 million subscribers, I'd say. A noticeable outlier is the Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 plush video, Smiling Critters plush, Catnap's Mom, which has around 800,000 views released around 10 months after the chapter was released. I guess it's still the best chapter to come out yet. It seems FNAF plush videos are still big and semi-popular in 2025, which is incredibly cool. I love FNAF plush videos, and seeing them still doing some numbers is actually really heartwarming. Though some moments don't last forever. Now that we're familiar with the success of Sly Pie, I do feel it is necessary to also look at the controversial side. I've been a long-standing fan of watching FNAF plush videos, or even just plush videos, since I was younger. YouTubers such as Mario Muffet Adventures were my favorite. Basically, this has a special place in my heart as a massive FNAF and FNAF plush fan, so it's important to talk about. Almost every YouTuber has been in controversy despite a few outliers. Despite this information, it is important to never send hate to anyone and to take everything on the internet with a grain of salt, as information can always be changed, misrepresented, or doctored. Starting more on the opinion and less controversial side, in the catalog of fun and more joyful plush videos, some certain ones like Catnap's Uncle are a little more on the strange side, featuring hit characters like Scatnap. Yeah. I don't know about that. Some of the older videos feature some rough humor that may or may not be acceptable these days. I don't know. Despite that, these are kids' videos, and I feel it's unfair to view it through the eyes of someone who's older. It's not even really controversy, but it is important to state that some people have found these videos disturbing and uncomfortable to watch, and maybe they aren't for everyone. Now that we got that out of the way, it's time for the meat of the sandwich in terms of Sly Pie controversy. In a now archived video titled The Truth Behind Puggo's Pizzeria, which you can find on YouTube still through re-uploads, he called out the YouTuber Puggo's Pizzeria, who is a whole different can of worms on their own. He brings to light several accusations that should probably end a career if found to be true. The video opens up with bullet point 1, Puggo's first slip-up. Stated to happen back in April of 2020, Puggles responded to a criticism video by another YouTuber plush critic, who I couldn't find any information on at all. I'm pretty sure the YouTube channel's been deleted. Anyway, Puggo was sending his Discord server to witch hunt the creator of said video. He was also using YouTuber Freddy Pop Collector for content exploitation, as Sly Pie states, in similar veins to blackmail and emotional abuse. Sly states that Puggo went out of his way to dislike all of the videos and say hurtful things about Critic. Critic tried to confront him about Freddy Pop Collector, and it is around this time that Sly Pie actually got involved himself, when Puggo joined Sly's Discord and started harassing innocent, non-involved members that had nothing to do with the controversy, which is already pretty abysmal. He also apparently faked a Discord image of the YouTuber who criticized him saying racial slurs and posted it on the YouTuber's Discord. Puggo really had no reason to do this, considering the state of his own Discord server, which... it was like, let's just say it was worse for wear, especially around 2020. You can imagine what was being said. Puggos raided Sly's server, encouraging racial slur spamming. The second bullet point is much less damning than the first, but it's still important to paint the whole picture of what this controversy was really fueled by. Number 2, clout chasing. Puggo apparently liked to brag a lot about money, subs, views, the whole lot, even going through the effort to ask Sly where he could buy a nice pair of shoes to flex on people, asking, "Hey Sly, I kinda wanted to buy some nice looking expensive shoes. Any I should get?" Followed by, what's the most expensive or rare? so I'm gonna buy those and maybe another pair and flex. The next bullet point is number 3, scamming. Puggos requested PlushTuber Happy Nightmares for a Spring Bonnie plush, which is around $200 in return for a custom Freddy Frostbear. Puggos stated that he wanted the plush for a YouTube video. He actually ended up selling the Spring Bonnie plush for $200, despite already having 3 of them beforehand without telling Happy Nightmares. Happy asked for the plush back because he thought it would be used for video instead of being sold. Puggo declined giving it back and even told him the plushie got lost in Texas, and several other excuses as to why the plushie never got to Happy. Eventually, due to backlash, he sent Happy another Spring Bonnie, and, well, it was fake. Not a real one, because it's apparently too expensive for his rich lifestyle. Sly Pie is very critical of Puggos the whole time, as he should be, considering all the stuff he's done. This isn't even it. There's so much more in the video, but I'm gonna be quicker about different parts of this because most of this is about Puggos and, you know, what he did and not Sly Pie himself, and I'm sure you've already heard about Puggos. It's bad. The last point of this bullet point was how Puggos scammed his fans in a technically not illegal way by claiming that he and McFarlane, the FNAF Lego people, were partnered, or that they sponsored him and he would get the sets early. He didn't. This was technically not illegal, but still a lie. The next bullet point was about Puggo's editor, whose name I'm not going to use, even though in the video, Puggo and Sly Pie both used it. I'd just rather not. I don't know if they're still on the internet or something like that. Sly exposes their relationship in this story as he stated in the video. Puggo apparently doesn't credit them for basically anything and pays jack shit. Through screenshots put in the video, you can see a supposed situation where Puggo attempted to hack into the person's parents' PayPal to pay the editor for the edits instead of paying them through his own money. This person left the community, which makes sense. I wouldn't want to stay there either. Several amounts of harassment from Puggo's side. Point number 6, transphobia. One day, a trans person joined Puggo's Discord and started talking like everyone does, because that's what servers are for, and they're a person the same as everyone else. To quote Sly Pie, Puggo said, "Ill trans people these days hate homosexuals." Which, if true, is actually vile, and still somehow not the worst thing he's done. Number 7 addresses how he threatens to dox YouTubers as well. He threatened to dox YouTubers Critic and Duckus's address, which is kind of creepy, and should probably get him in a lot of trouble considering that's like hella illegal, but he's still posting, so I guess it doesn't matter. He did all of this because they talked bad about him. Fragile ego. Not only this, but Puggo asked several people for their address, which is 100% creepy and should be a red flag to anyone. Number 8 is not even in the same pool as the rest, as it's just clickbait. In this section, he criticizes Puggos for not actually listening to the FNAF song for 24 hours, quoting that it's a copy of Mr. Beast's video where we would listen to things for 24 hours, not his exact words. Kind of, I shouldn't have said quote. While it seems pretty mild, it's not the full picture of the video. It's just like something he felt like bringing up, which, I mean, to be fair, clickbaiting is kind of bad on YouTube, I suppose. The final bullet point is back on track with manipulation. Puggos is a known manipulator with more than enough screenshots to back that up. I don't believe that I have to go crazy deep into all of this, as the stuff before this shows, you know, the screenshots and the section all before this shows, and they kind of speak for themselves. This is all pretty disgusting, and it really speaks for itself, but what does it say about Sly Pie? This is about him, after all. Well, he's apparently friends with Puggos after all of this, even collabing on a plush video a little over a year ago. So the reason this video was taken down is pretty apparent now. No hate to Sly Pie, it just feels weird to be friends with someone who you accused of things as terrible as this, but it's none of my business to meddle in these people's personal lives, and, you know, don't witch hunt anyone, don't send hate, it's not worth it. You'll be just as bad as them. Last part of this controversy video is, strange. So I checked the PlushTuber wiki just to get any extra info I may have missed, but it appears that someone either really hates Sly Pie or they don't monitor at all, because it's kind of weird. First part of the wiki states, Sly Pie has a peculiar sexual attraction to Toy Chica's fat honkers. So much so, he even decided to make an entire video dedicated to this topic titled Toy Chica's Plastic Surgery. He has since deleted the video after receiving lots of backlash. Okay, first, what? Whoever wrote this has some malice, because later on in the wiki it states that the achievements for 2024 are Toy Chica porn and sloppy sex with Puggo's Pizzeria. Okay, yeah. I can only imagine that SlyPie has no idea that this exists, because that's kind of wild for a plush tuber wiki which is meant for kids. Once again, don't trust everything you see on the internet, because the wikis can be edited by anyone, as is apparent by what it says. Now, what can't be edited by everyone is the aforementioned Toy Chica video titled Toy Chica's Plastic Surgery, released April 20th, 2024, which is a little too close to the current date. For comfort. 20 seconds in, and holy shit, I cannot sit through this anymore. This is very much the beach episode of the SlyPie universe, instantly starting off with Toy Bonnie thirsting for Toy Chica and her extra appendages. The whole video is basically Toy Chica gets plastic surgery, everyone freaks out, passes out, or dies, I don't know. It all happens in like 12 minutes, so it's over before I can think about what I witnessed. Surprisingly, SlyPie is actually aware of this re-upload, and unlike the past where it was documented that he copyright strike people, which should have been mentioned on its own actually, he actually commented on the video saying, "That's it, you're done," which is, I assume, a lighthearted and a joke, since the video is still up to this day, though it's not really in good taste if he did copyright strike people like he stated in the YouTube wiki, sorry. SlyPie is still posting videos to this day and staying out of controversy, as it seems. I couldn't find anything more recent than that. Despite becoming friends with Puggos and unlisting the call-out video, SlyPie is rather clean in recent terms, but I fear that maybe it might not stay that way. Hopefully it does, because the FNAF community needs more joy, man.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. Again, be sure to check him out in the description below.
Smiler.
Another guest, yippee! Did I just leave the door open or something? I want to bring on Nintendo Boy for this one. He makes pretty good content on his channel, and you guys should definitely check him out. He makes content on a variety of gaming related topics, especially FNAF, horror, and Nintendo. Anyway, take it away. Now I need to lock my door.
Smiler Fusifer, formerly known as Pyro Rapid Fox, is a FNAF fangame developer who is most well known for programming and publishing Five Nights at Sonic's Maniac Mania. The reason he's on this iceberg is for his numerous controversies, starting with the most well-known from November of 2023, when people found out Smiler was polling people on his NSFW Twitter account about which character he should draw porn of. Amongst these options were Blaze the Cat and Toy Tales. And for those of you who don't know, Blaze the Cat is 14 years old. And while Toy Tales may be a robot, they are also based off of someone who is also a child. Next, he came under scrutiny for mistreatment of staff, one prominent example being Clunsgod, the artist behind most of Maniac Mania. Smiler said a lot about him behind his back, like insulting his artwork. He even went as far as planning to hire a new artist just to replace all of Cluns' assets. On top of that, Clunsgod was only paid a whopping $20 for all of his efforts. Not by the hour, just altogether. The last notable one that I did not know of until very recently is his history of using the N-word and saying other racist stuff. This was brought to my attention by a friend of mine that I'll leave anonymous. His N-word usage specifically was on his old Discord burner account, which is now deleted. With all of his controversies piling up, this led to projects Smiler was working on, like Maniac Mania expansions and Five Nights at Sonic's All-Stars, to be cancelled, and he subsequently left the internet. That is, until he returned a while later and made a GameJolt post addressing all of his mistakes and making an effort to apologize to the community. Ex-members of Team Cyanix took issue with him coming back due to many other reasons, which would take even more time to explain, so feel free to look through the post and come to your own conclusion on that. Maniac Mania was eventually re-uploaded to itch.io by Smiler, but not on GameJolt, and it still hasn't been. Most, if not all, of his previous projects that were still in the works are still cancelled though, with no sign of them ever releasing.
Nicely done, Nintendo. Be sure to check out his channel in the description. Moving on.
Dr. Doggo.
Dr. Doggo is someone who was notable within the FNAF community. Now, they were immediately brought into infamy when accusations came out of him being a zoophile, specifically accusing him of fucking his own dog, even to the point of his dog's death. Dr. Doggo would end up making a response to the accusations. However, this response would be poorly received due to how within it, he would contradict his claims about not doing the things he was accused of. He would contradict his claims by saying how he would, quote-unquote, when in the heat, I'd lay down on my stomach and let things go from there, quote-unquote. Dr. Doggo would be exiled from the FNAF community for this, and there hasn't been a trace of him since. It is also to be noted that apparently, a lot of people were confusing Dr. Doggo's name for Direct Doggo, the creator of Day Shift at Freddy's and Dial Town phone dating sim. Even in the FNAF community, there can be people capable of actions like zoophilia. Yeah.
Golden Rabbit.
This should be the final guest of the video. I got Joey Does Stuff aka Vivian to come talk about this entry. She was previously on the various After Interpretations video, and she's got a channel of her own where she makes her own content. I once again, just like last time, recommend you guys check out her channel. Take away, Vivian.
Alex, who's known as Golden Rabbit online, used to be a pretty infamous Twitter user in the FNAF community. The reason is that they were involved in the Vietnam ruin situation. That controversy was already explained in the Iceberg. Just a very quick summary, Alex made a joke about Vietnam calling Ruin boring, and said that we should say FNAF Plus is boring when it comes out. This resulted in some psychopaths harassing them on their DM and even going as far as posting a Facebook news video to traumatize a 16-year-old. However, that's not the reason why Alex has their own entry in this Iceberg, because this entry is referring to a controversy that happened to them a few months after the Ruin situation happened. This one isn't as well documented as the Ruin drama, and it doesn't help that Alex's Twitter account was suspended by the site for breaking their rules. I couldn't even access a full document on him for some reason, so this is all I could find about this whole thing. A Twitter account by the name of Valk's Heart called out Alex for pursuing them into making an NSFW art of Spring Bonnie. It didn't help that Val is 13 years old, and while Alex was still a minor while doing this, it still came out as gross for everyone else. A few accounts talk about how he goes into their DMs and says disgusting stuff in there. And there was a Discord message going around about how he had a disgusting fetish. Why? Alex made a response on his Discord server stating that he only behaves like this because he was groomed by multiple adults, which ended up making him hypersexual when he was 14. He thought the gross fetish stuff was normal to him because the groomers convinced him that it was normal. He told his members that he would seek some help and promised to improve as he said sorry. Except this whole apology that he made meant nothing as he continued to pressure Val into making the NSFW art. This is according to Roxy Wolf 18, where Alex told them that he would stop harassing Val, but kept doing it multiple times anyway. After his Twitter account got suspended, it was the last time we have ever heard of him online, and I don't think anyone wants him to come back. Thanks for having me on this video, Taylor, and make sure to check out not only their content, but also the other YouTubers that showed up to talk about this Iceberg. Also, congratulations on the engagement. I am so happy for you.
Thank you so much, Vivian, for coming on, as well as the kind words about my engagement. Again, be sure to check out Vivian's channel for more FNAF content in the description below, just like the other guest stars in this video. But as well, speaking of engagement, I want to take a little bit of time real quickly to promote my fiance, Spanky. They're an amazing person and an incredible content creator. They have a Twitch channel where they stream frequently, typically Dead by Daylight, so if you're into that game, there you go. And they have a TikTok account where they post said Dead by Daylight clips. As well, they have a YouTube channel in which they plan on using for their future animations, artwork, and more, so be sure to check their links out in the description. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Now back onto the Iceberg.
Twisted animatronic.
This entry is referring to a YouTuber within the FNAF community. Now, this guy is controversial because of how he allegedly stole and plagiarized somebody's theory and turned it into his own video without credit. Pretty much Reddit user Joke and Quinn would post a theory on Reddit about why they think Withered Foxy doesn't get fooled by the mask in FNAF 2. This theory would garner some attention. Now, Twisted Animatronic would make a video about the same theory pretty much. However, it was noted that he pretty much straight up copied Joe Quinn's Reddit post word for word. Joe Quinn would go onto Reddit about this and would be utterly disappointed by the video. A lot of other people were showing their concerns too. This guy would apparently steal fan renders for his videos too, especially for his thumbnails. Twisted Animatronic is also guilty of deleting comments criticizing him for these actions. These days, Twisted Animatronic is seen as a content farm channel by many, and his theft was just bullet to the wound for many in regards to this channel.
Return to the Pit.
Return to the Pit is the third interactive novel to come from the FNAF franchise. This one is about the Into the Pit story from Fazbear's Fright that got turned into a game. Now, the reason why this book is notably controversial is for one of the endings you can get. Again, this book is a choose your own adventure style book and you can get multiple endings. This one ending in particular pretty much lets you go back in time and stop Spring Bonnie from murdering the children. A lot of people took issue with this ending because it would lead to the assumption that what happened with the MCI and etc. in FNAF was all pointless because it could apparently be fixed with time travel. There were people who thought people were overreacting about it, but this simple little ending in this book got people up in arms. Like I said, the interactive novel stops so there won't be rooms for issues like this to happen anymore, surely.
The Bones 5.
The Bones 5 is a YouTuber notable within the FNAF Max Mode community. There's a whole ordeal involving a spreadsheet that was made by the Bones called the FCL, or FNAF Challenges list. It was supposed to rival the FNAF Max Mode list. Apparently the people involved with the FNAF Challenges list would spread misinformation about the FNAF Max Mode list just so they can be seen as the better list. Apparently transphobic and fatphobic statements would be made about people within the FNAF Max Mode community. The Bones 5 would allegedly be involved with a lot of the wrongdoings from this ordeal. A lot of this would be made public by another FNAF YouTuber, Frogger25. The Bones 5 would make a response video which was torn to shreds by some people due to them seen as disingenuous and just trying to get by with his younger audience. Eventually though, Frogger25 would make clarifications about his video and both him and the Bones 5 would constantly state for their fans not to harass anyone. This however did not get to some people as some people still harassed others anyway. Bones can never quote-unquote became a popular quote. The Bones 5 still makes content to this day, but people haven't forgotten about the FCL.
PJ Haywood.
PJ Haywood is known as William Afton's original voice actor debuting in Sister Location. Now, he was a somewhat controversial figure in the community, usually for two reasons. One of them being how he allegedly would say racist statements about Chinese people. The other main reason being how he would allegedly state positive stuff about NFTs. There was notably outrage from people when he would make these statements, so it led to him deleting his Twitter account with those tweets on it. While there are still people that are not huge fans of the guy, there are a lot of people who have forgotten about what he said, mostly due to how when it came to him reprising his role as Afton/Springtrap in the FNAF Dead by Daylight chapter, his voice performance was really well received. People were happy he came back. So in the end, these controversies with Haywood aren't in the minds of fans, which is the case for a lot of controversies to be fair.
Five Nights of Fun.
Five Nights of Fun was an event that took place at Chuck E. Cheese, coincidentally on October 27, 2023, the release of the first FNAF movie. It was an event intended to celebrate Halloween. Now, this was controversial because of how it seemed that Chuck E. Cheese, with this event, was ripping off FNAF and even writing off the eventual success of the movie. A lot of people didn't like this, especially because of how in the past, Chuck E. Cheese notably has made it very clear the brand wants no association with the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. While the official Twitter account would even go out of their way to block people on Twitter who compared this Halloween event to FNAF. It was also noted that the promotional poster for this Five Nights of Fun event is so clearly a knockoff of the FNAF movie poster, with how the characters are aligned and everything. It was even leaked that employees were not allowed to mention FNAF at all, and they had to say certain phrases that indirectly referenced the series to get around it. At the time, this was a whole debacle, and it was something that nowadays a lot of people and fans have forgotten about.
Kane Carter vs. Bondies.
This entry is referring to how Kane Carter once showed disdain towards the FNAF fan game Bonnie's Barnyard. It is simply due to the game's art style. Multiple months after this was allegedly said, the developer of the game, Otis Laputis, made a tweet about it on Twitter. It was essentially a joke tweet that wasn't meant to stir up any type of drama, as Otis is actually a fan of the Pop Go series, as stated in the replies of the tweet. The joke tweet, however, would catch the eye of King Carter, who personally took it to heart as he saw it as a way to stir up controversy to get people to mention his past controversies and pile it up on him. There were people thinking he was taking this tweet from Otis too seriously, while there was also people that thought Otis was trying to intentionally start drama. Whether you're more for Kane, more for Otis, or somewhere in the middle is up to your interpretation.
Post-Shift 2 Aya interview.
This entry is referring to how the YouTuber Aya made a video reviewing the previously talked about fan game Post-Shift 2. He wasn't a huge fan due to how a lot of the criticisms people had that I listed in the earlier entry on this iceberg. As well, Aya decided he was going to interview the developer of the game, RedJack25, in the same video. However, this video was not very well received. People's main reasons boiled down to how Aya was phrasing his questions to the point where it was making RJack feel embarrassed, as well as feeling like he was being scolded for his work. People point out how RedJack didn't get much opportunity to speak his mind about the game or himself due to how much he was getting shut down by Aya. This would leave a severe black mark in Aya's career, as this video would be a huge reason why some people don't like him. It also just goes to show people on how not to do an interview with someone over something like a FNAF fan game.
Psycho Clown Studio.
Psycho Clown Studio is known as a fan game developer among the FNAF community. He's probably most known for Benny the Clown Circus World, a FNAF fan game that was played by multiple YouTubers and people. Now, the reason why he's controversial is because of how allegedly he would reskin FNAF fan games without giving any credit to the original creators. This was a big deal to people because it showed how apparently lazy he was for a creator. He would even go as far as to ask for the MFA files for fan games too. As of currently, he's still making FNAF fan games to this day, and hell, actual original ones, so people are glad about that.
Jacob Navin III.
Jacob Navin III is an individual who was notable in both the FNAF community and When I Have Flumpties community. He was someone who was helping with people on a fan-made revival project for the cancelled 1 Week of Flumpties. Although there were people who were fans of him and admired him, he had some people that would make a mockery of him as well as his work. However, he would end up losing the respect he had acquired because Jacob, as an 18-year-old man, sent pictures of his penis, pictures of cum on his phone screen, and his porn folder, all to a 13-year-old in Discord DMs. He also drew porn of a teenage girl from real life and attempted to play it off as just a harmless joke. He would also apparently suicide bait as well. He would just play victim to everything that came his way, despite there being proof he did what he did. He also allegedly had sex with his own sister, so incest. As well, when Jacob was in his 20s, there was a 13-year-old girl who developed a crush on him. Jacob would apparently enable this type of admiration. When the 13-year-old girl had personal issues going on in her life involving family, and she needed someone to go to, nobody, not even Jacob, would help her. He'd even tell her he would adopt her when given the chance. This person has since barely any activity on the internet since his cancellation, and it just goes to show that even in the sub-communities of FNAF like the Flumpties community, there's people like this in them.
Scout2 illustrates.
Scout2 illustrates is someone who is heavily associated with the Return to Freddy sub-community. He has also created character models too. Now he's pretty much exposed for liking lolly and just porn of underage characters in general. Allegedly this would be openly clear as day on his DeviantArt. He was exposed for this and he would ultimately get cancelled from the community. Even in the Return to Freddy's community, there's people like this.
Gami Renard.
This entry is referring to the people who created the FNAF Roblox game Animatronic World. Apparently the developer would get himself involved in sexual conversations with minors that would ultimately get him cancelled. He would also apparently not take action involving various pedophilic cases among the staff of the game. As of right now, Animatronic World is no longer available and the developer has seemingly disappeared. A lot of people were disappointed by this news as Animatronic World was considered a childhood favorite Roblox FNAF game, and it just goes to show how even in the Roblox FNAF community, there can be controversies like this.
Bonnie Pillow Pet.
This entry is referring to how when the Bonnie pillow pet was released, it was quickly noted by fans that the promotional tweets and posts about it referred to Bonnie by female pronouns. With this, people started making jokes that Bonnie is trans now. The Pillow Pets company would reply to one of these tweets calling Bonnie trans with, "Okay, oops," quote unquote. This was quickly brought to infamy by the FNAF community, and this led to people actively choosing not to get the Bonnie Pillow Pet. Some people argue that they were trying to acknowledge they messed up Bonnie's pronouns, but it was worded so terribly to the point where they could be perceived as transphobic. Whatever you believe about the situation is up to you. However, there was somewhat of a small issue brought up with how they used Rockstar Bonnie to promote a pillow pet based off of classic Bonnie. Pillow Pets would respond to this too by saying that when they work with a franchise, they use the image that was given, and apparently they were given Rockstar Bonnie. This merch announcement was considered a mess to people, even if it was somewhat minor in the grand scheme of FNAF controversies.
Mr. Moonpie.
Mr. Moonpie is referring to an inside joke within the Five Nights at Max Tonight sub-community of FNAF fan games. Five Nights at Max Tonight is a fan game series created by Malrat, which has several McDonald's mascots from the 80s, especially Max Tonight as the main animatronics that come for you. Throughout the series, Mr. Moonpie was a nickname used for Max Tonight in a comedic fashion. It was started around 2017 by the YouTuber Intellectual Conversations, also known as Bud or the Next Genius, and he would refer to Mac as that simply because he simply looked like a moon pie. At first, everyone, even Malrat himself, thought the joke was very funny, even to the point where it was acknowledged in the game itself. After a while though, the joke got really old and annoying, especially to Bud and Malrat. People, specifically younger fans, would non-stop keep saying the little meme over and over, and it was heavily discouraging for Malrat to keep going with the Mac Tonight games. However, he would keep releasing Mac Tonight games up until 2019, and in the later games, the Mr. Moonpie joke would be somewhat embraced. Crazy how a simple joke can start off being so funny, to becoming very overplayed to the point where it causes genuine issues, bouncing right back to being somewhat a funny joke again. Funny, isn't it?
FNAF 1 Remake cancelled.
This entry is referring to a FNAF 1 remake that was announced to be in the works in early 2022. This game was seemingly going to just be a simple remake to FNAF 1. This gained controversy though due to the amount of FNAF remakes that were being made at the time, so the community saw this project as unoriginal. People even compared the game to FNAF Plus, calling Plus superior. However, this negative feedback would get to the developers so much that they cancelled the game. There were rumors that the game was going to contain more than there was expected in a FNAF 1 remake, but regardless, there has been nothing new said about the game since. Only time will tell if it comes back, and if it does, if people don't get up in arms about it, just so it doesn't get cancelled again.
Go Motion vs. Pop Goes.
This entry is referring to the multiple instances there is of FNAF YouTuber Go Motion speaking negatively of Pop Goes and its creator King Carter publicly on Twitter. The reason why this has an entry on the iceberg is because the amount of backlash that happens each and every time is a result of Go Motion speaking about it all, typically even coming from King Carter himself. One notable time of this was how on December 1st, 2024, Go Motion quote retweeted a tweet on Twitter about how silent the development of Candy Spore was. She pretty much said how she was fine with this approach as Amel isn't pushing hyper merch or spin-offs and etc., which was an obvious nod to King Carter and Pop Goes. This would result in Kane further quote retweeting her tweet, defending himself with how distant each merch and spin-off drop/release was, and even questioning why Pop Goes is always singled out in arguments like this. However, this incident would not even come close to this next particular incident. On April 30th, 2025, after Kane would publicly showcase new behind-the-scenes images of False Balloon Boy and Pop Goes Evergreen, Go Motion would post a Jimmy Neutron meme about how Kane is constantly showing the same stuff with nothing rather than anything new or interesting, and how Pop Goes Evergreen is never coming out. This would result in a response from Kane as well, where he would showcase a 1-second clip of False BB and Evergreen. This would also result in Kane posting a Game Jolt devlog the next day about what's been going on with Evergreen and giving further details about the game and its spin-offs. Go Motion would even go on to accuse Kane of multiple things, such as people in the development team being mistreated by Kane under his leadership and making anti-Semitic and racist jokes, especially ones about Jewish tricks. Despite screenshots or proofs of these claims never being shown publicly, leading to a decent amount of people not believing these accusations, there's still a decent amount of people that do believe in these accusations anyway, due to Kane's past controversies that do have proof backing them up. This all leads to how after this controversy between Go Motion and Kane, people have started bringing up Kane's past controversies as a way to remind everyone about how much of a terrible person and developer Kane is in their eyes. People have also notably taken issue with Go Motion as well, people thinking she's become more harsh in her tone and wordings in particular instances on both Twitter and Discord. This has also led to a public response from Go Motion where she acknowledges and pretty much apologizes for this. However, her opinions on Popgoose and King Carter still stand for the reasons she's already stated, despite her admitting she could have handled her approach and wording better. There's still a lot of mystery to how true Go Motion's accusations towards Kane are, but these instances of these two well-known FNAF creators beefing often stick out just for how much happens in the FNAF community, at least on Twitter, as an aftermath. And note, this was all before Go Motion's allegations, so it's pretty intriguing to say the least. As well, one final thing, Kane has even made a jab towards Go Motion after she got exposed, so there's also that.
Springtrap and Delilah.
This entry is referring to a comic where the reason it's controversial itself is because it centers around Springtrap being obsessive over a 14-year-old girl. Due to that basic premise, a lot of people found the comic to be pretty weird. The thing as well is that it's not even just the comic itself that's controversial. The creator of the comic, Girl Wolf Quinn, is also a pretty controversial figure. The most infamous controversy made towards Quinn is how she would ship Springtrap and Delilah and even do erotic roleplays with the two, especially where she was Springtrap. There are multiple screenshots and evidence to back a lot of these accusations up about Quinn. Some of this shipping Quinn would do between the two characters even involved sexual assault. A lot of people have claimed that the creator's actions are tied to the intent of why Springtrap and Delilah was written in the first place, where she's made people both disappointed and upset with the comic. Now, some people argue that since this happened years ago, it doesn't matter as it's possible Quinn could have been proof of what she was doing. But a lot of people are still not huge fans of her or her comic anymore due to the controversy.
Jason Blum and Wokeness.
This entry is referring to how it was discovered that Jason Blum, the founder of Blumhouse, the company that makes the FNAF movies, was following an End Wokeness account. This was quickly brought to infamy by FNAF fans upon its discovery due to how the End Wokeness account would post straight up bigotry. Because of this, it has led people to start debates on the type of person Jason Blum is, even accusing some of his movies as harmful, like demonizing a character with multiple personalities in Split, and as well as the movie They Them in general. To this day, Jason Blum himself has never responded to this issue, and it doesn't seem like he will.
Devin Manning.
Pretty much Devin Manning, known as the creator of Finds of Darls with the internet, reason being due to pedophilia accusations. There has been screenshot evidence provided for these accusations which pretty much prove their legitimacy. He was also notably around this time making some pretty questionable choices, especially when it comes to his fetishes and sharing them online. In the end, people are just glad that Manning's off the internet for good.
Nami Gaga.
Nami Gaga is someone who's known for their FNAF AU, however she's controversial for a multitude of reasons. One reason in particular is how apparently she ships Springtrap and the puppet. This is seen as problematic due to Springtrap being an adult and the puppet being a child. She's also apparently drawn NSFW of minors. She also apparently would put rather disgusting things with her AU such as incest and rape. She is also apparently racist. And finally, Nami Gaga has also been most infamously accused of being a pedophile, as apparently she would state that she doesn't care about age and how it's just about love. A lot of people would agree that Nami Gaga shouldn't be on the internet and have a platform, especially since she has an audience people consider as impressionable. This is another controversial person within the FNAF AU community, which there's plenty of.
Hex Chocolate Bonnie plushie.
This entry is referring to how when the Hex brand released a Chocolate Bonnie plushie, it was notably high priced. This was due to the material the plushie was made with, the fact it came chocolate scented, as well as the ongoing tariffs. There was a young fan in particular that took issue with how overpriced it was and went to Dawko on Twitter to complain about it. Dawko tried to explain what was going on to the fan, but the fan kept resisting, even having to explain their situation to Dawko. Eventually Dawko gave in and offered them the plushie for free. However, though, the fan would end up getting suspended on Twitter. This was quite the situation because a lot of people thought the fan should have been more respectful towards Dawko. On the same coin though, there are people who think Dawko shouldn't have gave in. There was also even people who agree with the fan that the Chocolate Bonnie plushie and by proxy the Hex merch is overpriced. It's certainly quite the case of someone trying to get their way but leading to unexpected consequences.
Steel glass door.
This entry is referring to a Glassdoor review that was allegedly posted by a former employee of Steelwool Studios, the company behind Help Wanted 1 and 2, Security Breach, and Secret of the Mimic. This review would criticize the company for brutal crunch time, lack of proper communication with executives, blatant favoritism, shady and unprofessional executives, and more. Now, it's unconfirmed if this Glassdoor review is true or not, similar to the Illumix one that I discussed briefly in my previous Controversy Iceberg, but this was enough to get FNAF fans to start talking and debating. Steelwool themselves have never made an official response to this, so true answers are currently dead in the water. It is also to be noted that recently, as of writing the script for this video, it has been revealed that Steelwool did lay off their QA department, the people in charge of testing their games. Due to this, people have brought up the Glassdoor review, thinking this recent news confirms it to be true. Now, a lot of people believe the let-offs were not done with malicious intent and were only done for last-ditch effort financial reasons, however, it's still noteworthy to point all this out.
Funny Guy 13.
Gabe, also known as Funny Guy 13, is someone who is known as becoming a content creator within the FNAF space. Now, the main accusation to his name was grooming a minor, Gabe being 22 and the minor being 17, which was a 5-year age gap. During the relationship, Gabe would deflect blame onto the minor and their mother. That's not all, though. There was another accusation made towards Gabe when he was 18 sexting a 15-year-old over Snapchat. There's also alleged sexual assault accusations too, as Gabe allegedly did so as well as get angry over discussions involving the FNAF floor. Crazy switch up, I know. The survivor of Gabe's sexual assault would apparently cut contact with him shortly after. Now, to get away from grooming-related accusations, there were also accusations of mass reporting accounts of TikTok with burner accounts over either dislike or jealousy towards FNAF theories he didn't like. After being called out for this, Gabe would blame it all on everyone and try to threaten suicide. He would also apparently lie about his mom being in the hospital. He's allegedly stolen theories from other people within the FNAF community. One particular had to do with the Foxy grid in the survival logbook. He also apparently claimed all credit and ownership over a Miss Afton theory that he apparently got help for. Generally, Gabe has also just been a pretty toxic individual, saying he was going to be the next Mad Hat in the FNAF community. Gabe would allegedly even harass a theorist who changed their opinion to his and accused him of stealing Gabe's theory. Gabe would apparently make an apology video, but it's currently unlisted. There's also him making 9/11 jokes. And finally, on top of Dawko's charity streams, he would donate with a message saying, quote-unquote, "I always come back," to pretty much mock the people trying to expose them or call him out. This is one of the more recent infamous content creators in the FNAF community for multiple reasons. It just yet again just goes to show how content creators can truly be within the FNAF community behind closed doors.
Kane's opinion on Candy's popularity.
This entry is referring to how Kane Carter views the popularity of Five Nights at Candy's. Pretty much, there was a fanverse poll conducted by the YouTuber Johnny Blocks that asked which upcoming fanverse game people were the most excited for. Popgo's Evergreen was voted last, and Discord screenshots reveal that even Kane claimed to not be envious of the poll. He was baffled by Candy's 4 being out Evergreen. The main reason being how way more has been shown off about Evergreen than Candy's 4. This has led to speculation on what is truly going on in the head of Kane when it comes to his thoughts on Candy's. People would claim Kane was baby raging, while there were some people who saw Kane's point. Kane would respond by showing a message he sent after the original messages and the screenshot where he acknowledges Kane's popularity after all. Kane would claim in the Twitter replies it was another casual conversation that people took out of context to stir drama. In the end, this just goes down as another situation Kane found himself in that people got upset at him over. It's like a repeated pattern, man. Well, this was certainly a sequel. A sequel a lot of you wanted, and a sequel if you said you didn't want. Oh well. I enjoy talking about controversies and drama again, and I hope you all did too. Like I stated in the first Controversy Iceberg, there's always gonna be bad apples and a sea full of good apples. That sea being any online community, especially Five Nights at Freddy's. Whether it be bad people, bad situations, controversial media, and so much more. Whether you find a lot of these controversies serious or comedic is up to you watching this video. Your opinion on these controversies is up to your interpretation and thought, both of which are very much welcomed in the comment section down below. Again, I hope you all enjoyed this video. In terms of what's next for my Iceberg videos, what will most likely be next is the big remake to my FNAF fan game Iceberg. After that, I'll be working on a much bigger Iceberg, an Iceberg where the final length of the videos give you so many hours. It will be a modern and comprehensive and complete Find Freddy's Iceberg. It will be bigger than any of the pre-existing FNAF Icebergs currently on YouTube. It's going to be a big project, so stay tuned after I release the sequel for the fan game Iceberg. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. See you on the next one. Toodles!